Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Wednesday. You guys know what that means for us here. It is time for the Notre Dame Midweek Rundown. We have a bunch of awesome topics to talk about. First two parts of today's show, we're talking about recruiting. We're splitting it up between offense and defense, and we're talking about the must-get recruits in the 2027 class, both sides of the ball. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. Notre Dame looks to stack another top-level recruiting class on the number one overall recruiting class that they just brought in. But then after that, Brian, we thought it'd be time to sit down and rank the top 10 coaches, our top 10 rankings list for top 10 coaches in college football this season. And then to wrap everything up, we have a conversation about kind of like superlatives, most underrated, most overrated, up-and-comer, most approved. So still sticking with the theme of college football coaches. So it's going to be a loaded show today. I'm very excited to dive into this, man.
Yeah, not surprisingly, we had 9 of the 10 same coaches. We had some guys in different orders. I'm going to have some very interesting things to say during the coaching section of today's show, Trev. It's some very interesting things to say, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. But, there was a lot of things that we kind of thought we were going to talk about. Maybe we could do some draft stuff. I think we're going to hold off on the draft stuff till next Wednesday, to be a day before the draft, just do kind of like a final overview of different things. But, get asked a lot of, recruiting questions and there's a lot of kind of who's the hot name in the recruiting world right now and who's the guy that people are excited about, who's the guy people are going to lose their minds if they don't get, and all these other kind of things. And then also, who are the guys that Notre Dame's going to have to get closing out here to have another top 5 class? Will they have a number 1 class? We'll see. Long way to go for that, but there's a chance for them to have a top 5 class. But I'm not someone who's just convinced that they're definitely going to do that. And reason why is this is kind of a new staff. There's some players on the board. I mean, this recruiting staff is obviously you have Mike Martin, and then there's people like Carter Allman and Jordan Blake and people like that have been around since last year. But then there's a lot of new people like Kenny Sanders and DJ Bryant that came over from Penn State. How are they going to do? What's their evaluation ability? You've got a brand new defensive coaching staff, and the one holdover from a coaching standpoint, does almost no recruiting outside of just kind of talking to kids on visits. And so you're starting over from there. And I think it's an uphill battle. It can certainly be done. And I'm not setting the stage for to be okay if they don't get it. That's the expectation. That's what Marcus Freeman needs to make happen. It's simply saying, okay, if they're gonna do this, here are the things they need to do and the players they need to finish on. And it's not so much okay, here's the top 5 DNs and I'm gonna panic every time they don't get one of those 5, because here's the reality: if they only get 2 of those top 5, that's a heck of a defensive end class, but you're gonna freak out about 3 as opposed to being happy about 2. So I'm going to kind of dive into who I think the must-get players are, and then give some caveats on certain guys and players like that, and really get into it so people can understand. The first part of the show, we'll be looking at the offensive players that I think are the must-gets, and we'll kick off with one position that I don't think is a must-get, and then Trev will do defense after that before we talk coaches. But these are must-get in my view, just so we can all be on the same page. Is because if you're going to disagree with me on a must get, you have to understand the premise or the terms for which I define a must get, and it can change from player to player. A must get for me is not a player that's going to necessarily help Notre Dame finish with the number 1 ranked recruiting class. I don't really care about that as much as other people. It's cool when it happens, right? And you brag about it when it happens, but I care that I think it's a top class, and that the staff is getting the players that they value. That matters a whole lot more to me than what 247 and On3 and Rivals say. So with that in mind, Trevor, it comes down to several things. Top talents. It comes down to guys that are the gap closers, the needle movers, the big time players, guys that they've invested a certain level of time in. And then the third part is obviously you've got to fill needs. And the needs could be, hey, you're limited here on your depth chart, so you need, X number of players, or you're lacking this skill set on your depth chart that you need. You could say, I'll just give an example. Let's say receiver, you don't need a 5-man class because you just got a 5-man class. Okay, so you don't need volume. All right, well, you need an impact player. Well, kind of, but they landed some impact players last year. So Okay, well, you need an impact player that can do this. Okay, now we're talking because you're looking to add a skill set. It's like we talked about when we went into the portal. It just wasn't go get a stud receiver. It was you needed to get a receiver that can do this specific type of thing in your system, because this isn't ultimately about building the number one ranked recruiting class. This is about building the best roster in college football. And so, for example, Texas A&M can finish with the number one ranked recruiting class several years ago. But they had something like 8 defensive linemen. We can't, and 1 linebacker. Well, you can't put a defense on the field that way. What's made Freeman's classes good so the last couple of years is you could literally like put starting lineups on the field with the recruiting class. And that's what we're kind of looking to do. So that's what the terms are, the premise of what must get means in these 2 classes. And it'll vary from player to player. Sometimes a must get is like, you need to win this one because you need to make a statement on top of some other things. And when that's the case, Trev, I'll explain it. I'll define it. I'll let people know why each guy is that way. We'll have a little bit of film rolling as we're watching these players as well, and that'll always be fun. Apparently, Huddle thinks I need to buy a Jeep because I've watched 8 different Huddle commercials so far this morning as I'm getting some of this film ready, which is always loads of fun, Trev. But I'm ready to kick things off with this conversation, and we'll start, Trev, with a position that I will not be talking about today. You will not be hearing me talk about quarterback. And I think it's important for us to have a conversation about quarterback because I've been getting a lot of text messages and DMs on the site and different things about like, am I worried about quarterback? And my response is usually like, well, what should I be worried about? Well, they're not going to get a quarterback in the class. Okay, well, why is that a problem? Well, I mean, how's a quarterback? As a quarterback, you need a quarterback to recruit top receivers. How are you going to get top receivers if you don't have a quarterback in your class? To which I say, you do realize they have a quarterback in the 27 class, right? Like you do. Do you want to know ultimately what the big reason that Camden Lapati didn't come to Notre Dame was? Wasn't NIL money. It wasn't anything like that. It was he looked at Notre Dame's current depth chart and said, there was a guy in my class that you wanted more than me. And you went out and offered him. You didn't offer me last spring because Camden Lapati visited last spring. So did Teddy Gerard, and I believe so did Peyton Houston. And they said, well, we'd rather have Teddy Gerard. So now if I'm Camden Lapati, you got Teddy Gerard. You thought he was better than me. I'm going to go compete against him when he's got a year head start on me and they got Noah Grubbs. I don't know that that's a smart thing to do if your goal is to eventually be starting quarterback in college football at the place you sign with. The reality is Teddy Gerard reclassifying doesn't mean that Julius Jones Jr. and Quentin Burrell and Julian Caldwell and Tay Walden and Osani Gales and all the Trenton Yancey and all these other Jackson Dollar and Malik Howard and Titus Hawk and all these talented players don't all of a sudden put him on block on their phone. They don't block him on Twitter now that he's in the 26 class. They're still going to talk to Teddy Gerard. They still know he's a dude. And that's why I'm not really worried about quarterback. If they get one, great. I'm not going to be upset about it. It's great to have one. If Champ Mons decides he wants to come to Notre Dame and compete against Teddy Gerard and Noah Grubbs, awesome. I'll be fired up because he's a stud. My personal strategy is if you can get a stud in 28, you always go for that. You never turn down a stud, but you also have to make sure that you're bringing in the right kind of stud because you want to make sure you bring a kid in that's not going to come, realize after 1 year he's not starting, and then bail. So my strategy would be get a kid in the 27 class as talented as he can possibly be that you think will be some level of commitment to spending some time at Notre Dame to develop before he freaks out about not getting an opportunity to start, whoever that may be. And my focus right now would be on 2028 quarterback recruiting. Little question for you, Trevor, and I know you know the answer. In this spring visit period, has Notre Dame had more quarterbacks from the 28 class or the 27 class on campus? The answer is 28 class. Double that. They've had, that I know of for sure, 4. They've had Neiman Lawrence. They've had Lucas Prock. They've had Kingston Preyear, and they've had Brady Quinn. Only had 2. Actually, they've only had 1 27 quarterback on campus so far, and another's expected to come this weekend in Champ Mons. So I think that's really the strategy that Notre Dame is focused on. They got their 27 quarterback. If they don't get another one, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I told you guys last week what I would do. I'd go offer that kid from Michigan, Drake and Foster, and bring him in. He's a 4-year kid. He'll be a great special teams player, great teammate, got a hose for an arm. And then I'd focus on the spring or the 28 class. And that's where my focus would be.
Understandably so. Well, let's dive into the must-get players then on your list here. And it's starting out not with a position that a lot of people expected us to talk about today in quarterback, but a position near and dear to your heart, Brian. Let's talk about the wide receivers in the 2027 class. And it starts with a very, very familiar name amongst Notre Dame fans. We're talking about Julius Jones Jr. here as one of the top must-get players in this class.
I mean, I would argue he might be my number one must-get player in this class. And there's a lot of reasons why, Trevor. Number one is it's real simple. He's a stud. To me, he's an elite wide receiver. He's a difference maker. He's a guy that if he pans out and as good as we think he's going to be, can be a Will Fuller type of guy, can be a Michael Floyd type of guy, can be a Chase Claypool 2019 type of guy. Now, when I refer to those players, I'm not saying he has to have their specific skill set. I'm saying that number one dog game plan has to be geared around stopping him, difference maker. Will Floyd and Michael Floyd, Fuller have nothing in common in the skill set standpoint. The one thing they have in common, they're dominant players. The second thing they have in common, defenses completely altered their entire game plans to make sure those guys didn't beat them. And when they didn't do that, they got whooped by him. And so that's why I put Julius Jones Jr. in this conversation. Honestly, Trev, I'd be lying if I said not getting Julius Jones's son would be a big blow. It would be a big emotional blow. But if his name was Julius Davis Jr. and his dad played at Bethune-Cookman or James Madison back when they were in FCS school, or William and Mary, some FCS school was a backup at that school, wasn't even a big-time football player, and he was the same exact player he is, he'd still be right here in this must-get category. The practical aspect of him being a must-get is 100% on his talent, and the fact that he's an elite fit. He's a very high academic kid. He goes to a great private school in North Carolina, in the state of Florida, St. Thomas Aquinas. He fits the offense perfectly. He fits the type of playmaker, short game, intermediate, and deep game playmaker that Notre Dame wants. And the one thing he can do that some of the smaller receivers they've had in recent years can't do, including Will Fuller, is he can win contested catches in a way that you just don't see. Like the last short receiver that I've seen at Notre Dame that can win contested catches the way that he can is Golden Tate back in 2009. That's what sets Julius Jones Jr. apart for me, Trev, when I talk about the must-gets in this class. The fact that he's Julius Jones's son is more of an emotional desire to have Julius Jones's son here. But at the end of the day, if everything about him was the same except the fact that, or just say this, he was Julius Jones Jr., but Julius decided to follow his brother Thomas to UVA instead of Notre Dame, and he never played at Notre Dame. It doesn't change the desire to have him at Notre Dame at all from a practical football building an elite roster standpoint. That's the fan side that you like. The fan side of me would love for Julius Jones' son to come to Notre Dame. The coach side of me, the analyst side of me, the side that's evaluating whether or not Notre Dame's going to have an elite roster I don't care at all who his dad was or where his dad went to school. So that's got to be made clear, because I do think sometimes we can get wrapped up into thinking a son of a former player is a must-get because you want emotionally you want Jerome Bettis Jr. to be at Notre Dame. You can't, like when I wish Rocket Ismail's kid was like good enough to come to Notre Dame. I didn't like the fact he went to like Wyoming. Yeah, I wanted Rocket Ismail Jr. or Raheem Ismail Jr. to be at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? So emotionally, that's the case. That's where I'm at.
I get it. I get it completely. The emotional side, it would definitely play to a lot of those heartstrings. But when you have a player of this caliber, players like this need to start coming to Notre Dame. And we've talked about benchmark recruits before, and you can look at every position group on offense and on defense and kind of point to, hey, this is the player that elected to come to Notre Dame, and it kind of changed the narrative of recruiting at that position. I think Julius Jones Jr., if we, fast forward 10 years down the road, if he ends up committing to Notre Dame, we could look back to the 2027 recruiting class and say, hey, this turned around because players like Julius Jones Jr. elected to come to Notre Dame over other schools. Florida recruits start to build up that pipeline. It could be absolutely huge. I'm with you completely. But he's not the only. Now, before we move on to the next guy, are there any other like wide receivers that you would consider to be must-gets, Brian?
So there's not one other receiver that I'd want to get. There's a group of guys that I feel like Notre Dame has to get at least one of. If you get two, that's awesome. But when I look at like Quentin Burrell, I look at Julian Caldwell, I look at, Tay Walden's a kid that I really like in the class. Cade Cooper definitely is a kid that's on this list for me from Pennsylvania. There's other players, Trenton Yancey's kind of in that category. But if you get Julius Jones Jr., then I don't know that you also want to get Trenton Yancey because he's more in the line of Julius and Bubba Frazier and Dylan Faison and Braylon Robinson, those kind of guys. And they've got a lot of those. But it's more so focusing on some of those bigger guys that I think can be outside receivers. And that's what Quentin Burrell, Cade Cooper, Julian Caldwell, Tay Walden all have in common for me is I think they're all outside receivers. Julius can play anywhere, including the boundary. I mean, he's got that unique skill set that I don't think I'm going to use him the same way I used my Malachi Fields. But there's a lot of things you can do with him, like you did with Chris Brown back in 2015 when Mike Denbrock was the OC back then, that you can do with him in the boundary. And that's what I like about Julius. But I do need at least one impact guy that's a pure outside guy. Doesn't necessarily have to just be boundary, but an outside guy. If he can play boundary, that's ideal. And that's what, and again, you can put him in any order you want. Cade Cooper, Quentin Burrell, Julian Caldwell, and Tay Walden are kind of those guys that are on the board right now for me that are more of those outside players. I think you need to get one. They're all really talented players. 3 of them are ranked really high. Cade Cooper's not. He should be. I think he's every bit as good as those guys. If they got him, that'd be the same as them getting another top 100 player. Because for me on my board, Cade Cooper's a top 100 talent. So you've got to get one of those two guys. Because this class, Trev, at receiver is not about numbers. If they only land 2 receivers and it's Julius Jones Jr. and one of those 4, and that's all they get, fine, great, let's roll. And then now focus on 2028 because really 2 is really the minimum need. You have 5 receivers in last year's class. And so far, Trev, the 4 we've seen in uniform, or the 3 we've seen in uniform, look pretty good. Like, they're all going to be hits to some degree. And then, of course, we'll see Dylan Faison in the fall. He's currently playing lacrosse, and then Braylon Robinson is out. And so they're fine there. And if they have a bunch of guys transfer out, they can go to the portal, which they've done a lot of. I mean, they had a 3-man portal class 2 years ago at wide receiver. So I would love 3. I would love 2 of those guys. That's my dream class is 3. I'm simply saying if they get 2 and that's all they get and they miss on all the others, let's roll. As long as it's Julius and one of those 4. If you don't get Julius and you get 2 of those 4, that's still a really good class. But Julius is just a different animal for me that you've got to get. So I do think a second impact receiver is somebody that I'd like to see Notre Dame get, and it's got to be an outside guy.
No, I get that completely. With a 5-man class that just came in, it allows you to go big game hunting, and literally and figuratively with some of the names on this list, frees you up to go big game hunting. Now, let's talk about another position group here, Brian, where Notre Dame is slowly starting to stack those classes again like we've seen them previously do at a school that's been coined as tight end U. You brought in James Flanagan 2 years ago. This past season, you bring in Preston Frizzell, and Ian Premer is going to be here in the summer. And there's another 2027 tight end that we're considering as a must-get player, and that's Jackson Dollar, somebody that we are also very familiar with here.
Yeah, Trev, Jackson Dollar is another guy that is very high on my list. And look, this one is one of those things where getting Jackson Dollar is a twofold pickup for me. Number one is it's about stacking classes, right? I mean, I think there's some merit to that. Actually, it's really a threefold thing. It's about stacking classes. With how well you recruited tight end the last 2 years, I don't need numbers. I don't need projects. It's about keep loading up. You got James Flanagan 2 years ago, who was a stud. You got the best tight end class in the country last year in Ian Premer and Preston Frizzell. Premer will show up this summer. Preston Frizzell's looked every bit as good and explosive as we'd hoped he would so far in fall camp. It's about stacking classes. It's about loading up at this position and making sure that you don't ever just assume the current roster is going to stay intact. You can't do that in today's college football. I don't care who you are. And so that's part of it. And then the number 3 is, I think Jackson Dollar's got some must get to him in his game. I think he can complement Ian Premer very well. Ian Premer's kind of a guy that can move all around. Jackson Dollar does a lot of stuff in the slot. He can move around. He can place him outside. You could line him up and move him around, kind of like they did Ty Washington the last couple of years. I think he has some potential as an attached tight end in certain looks. But I don't know that I view him as being the same type of guy. Like, I think eventually down the road, Ian Premer can do whatever the heck he wants. I think he can line up attached and block. I think he can line up in the slot, boundary, whatever. I think Jackson Dollar is more of a pass catcher, first blocker, second, but there's some tools there to work with. He's a very raw player, despite how dominant he is. And the final piece for me with Jackson Dollar is, if you are talking about landing an elite class, you need big time elite players. And this is a kid Trev, that I view as a borderline top 50 player. He's ranked number 23 in the country by 247, On Three Rivals. He's ranked number 32 overall by 247 Sports. So he moves the needle. He continues to move the needle, or I should say, because the needle can move, and the needle right now is your recruiting tight end is good or better than anybody, and you just continue to pull away in that area, along with Georgia, who's also recruiting tight end at an elite level. But the other part is obviously complimenting the guys you have, and then getting a guy that can help you from a recruiting ranking standpoint, and just landing the kind of elite players you need to truly look and say, hey, we've got a top 3 class. You could have a lot of really good players, and be a top 5 to 8 class, but to be a top 3 class, you need some elite guys. And I think Jackson Dollar has elite tools. So does Julius Jones Jr. So do some of those other guys. And another guy that we're going to talk about, Trev, that I view as that elite kind of player is Albert Simeon. And I think I think you can make a case that Albert Simeon shouldn't be counted as a must-get player because, he's be a tough pickup and all those other kind of things. I absolutely think he is a must-get player. The main reason why is I think he's the best lineman on the board. And when you look at what Joe Rudolph has done in past years, he's landed an elite player every year. Coach Heastan landed Charles Jagasaw in 2023 class, and then in the 24 class, Coach Heastan started it, and then Joe Rudolph finished it by getting Gerby Lambert. Then in the 25 class, you got Will Black, both of them top 15, top 20, 5-star players. Then this class last year, you got Grayson McHugh, who was a 5-star player. So I think you're Notre Dame. You should get your top lineman that you want every year. And when I look at a kid like Albert Simeon, the other factor too, Trev, is not just the elite talent, but the fact is he's also as good of a Notre Dame fit as you're going to find. Like, honestly, we said this the other day when we broke him down before the visit. The only thing he truly lacks when it comes to designing the perfect prospect in a lab is he's not from Fort Wayne or, Granger. It's his location. That's going to make it tough. That's why his other schools are like LSU and Texas A&M and schools like that. But everything else about this kid screams Notre Dame. High academic young man. Mom is very much about what can you do for my son on and off the field. And moms like that usually love Notre Dame. I think he loves Notre Dame. But can you go into Louisiana and get the top big man in the state? Something you haven't done since all the way back in 2015 when they landed Jerry Tillery. That makes it a must get too. And I think the need, the fit, look, the more I watch this film, the more I think there's a world where you could start him at tackle and see if he can fit at tackle and stick at tackle. He's built very similarly to Anthony Knapp, but he looks more comfortable in space than Anthony Knapp did. I'd give it a shot. If he doesn't work, then you move him inside. This kid can truly, with his frame and athleticism and intelligence, I think once he gets college coaching, could literally play all 5 offensive line positions, and that's rare. That's very rare, Trev, because he also has enough of a low frame that he could play center. And so elite talent, elite fit on and off the field, versatility, and then the final piece is this is one of those you make a statement. This is a statement recruit for Notre Dame. Can you go into Louisiana and get a kid that everybody in the South wants to come up to South Bend, Indiana? 5-star kid, getting the NIL offers, all that stuff. Can you get that kid to buy into your vision beyond the NIL and come to Notre Dame? Can you get him to leave the South and come up north? That's not something we have seen this coaching staff do. They've done a great job recruiting, and this isn't to somehow bang their – but who have their top recruits been? Charles Jagasaul's from Illinois. Sullivan Absher's from North Carolina. That's like as far south as they've gone, really, for like a top guy. Anthony Knapp's from Georgia, but he didn't have offers from Georgia, Alabama, Florida, LSU, Texas A&M. They beat Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech for him. You look at Gerby Lambert, Massachusetts, private school in Massachusetts. Will Black, private school in Connecticut. Grayson McHugh, private school in Pennsylvania. Tyler Merrill, Pennsylvania. Ben Nichols, Sullivan Garvin, Gregory Patrick, all from Michigan. The one thing that Joe Rudolph has not shown, and this isn't like, again, he's done very well, but this to me is the final piece for him, is can you go down south and get a kid like this and beat out those Southern schools and go to battle with those Southern schools for a elite Southern kid who fits your program the way that Albert Simeon does? Because if you can't land this kid, then I don't know that you're going to have a lot of success recruiting elite Southern linemen moving forward.
Definitely would be a massive pickup in this class. I agree with everything that you said. There is also another player, Brian, in the trenches that is another must-get, and that's Leighton Von Brandt, another offensive lineman, and I believe he's from Delaware. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I think I read somewhere he's like from Jersey, but the school he goes to is in Delaware. So he's either from there's this area where Delaware, Jersey, southeastern PA all kind of are kind of close by, and I believe it's a private school. Leighton Von Brandt's another interesting kid, Trev. I think he's another musket guy. You're battling Southern schools for him as well. His top schools are Notre Dame and Penn State from up north, but the rest of his top list is like Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, schools like that. LSU is after him, from what I was told. I don't know how public that is, but they're definitely throwing some offers his way. You need to offensive line is the year you can't have a down year. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what if for some reason over the next couple of years, Gerby Lambert and Anthony Knapp both leave early. And then Will Black's a freshman All-American this year, and then next year in 2027 has another elite year, and he leaves early. We've seen Notre Dame – it used to be Notre Dame never lost junior offensive linemen. The only junior offensive lineman I remember them losing before recent seasons was Steve Elmer, and that's because he stopped playing football. You just don't see it. Ronnie Stanley – now, we've seen him lose some redshirt juniors like Ronnie Stanley, Quentin Nelson, guys like that, but those guys stayed in college for 4 years. Joe Walt left after his junior season. Blake Fisher left after his junior season. We're seeing that more and more just around college football with linemen, where we used to almost never see that. So you have to stack class. What if guys get hurt? Who saw Charles Jagasaul's crazy injuries coming? You just don't know. So I think those things are all important factors to why you can't just, we had a great class last year, so we're okay this year. I think you need to stack offensive line classes back to back. I love the start. Love James Halter. Really like Richie Flanagan. But if you want to have an elite offensive line class, a line that you say, hey, this is as good as anybody in the country, I don't know that you can do that without Albert Simeon and Leighton Von Brandt. Now, I like Cameron Wagner. I'd love to take Cameron Wagner as well, but the reality is these two guys to me are on a little bit of a different level. I think there's Von Brandt and Wagner are a little closer. Simeon's at the top of the list as far as my ranking, but Leighton Von Brandt's a top 100 player. I mean, he's an impact player. He's a guy that can play tackle. He's a guy that play guard. He's got the disposition, the demeanor that Notre Dame likes. So I think those things all factor in, Trev, to why I think you have to put Leighton Von Brandt in that one as well. And you've invested a ton of time in this kid. And can you beat SEC school? It's one thing to beat SEC schools for a guy like Albert Simeon. that's a huge positive. But if you lose him to SEC schools, it's like, well, you lose everybody. You lose a kid to Delaware to an SEC school. I don't know how I'd feel about that.
Yeah.
So you got to stack them. Got to stack them.
You talked about with Albert Simeon, his positional flexibility. You said with college coaching, you could see him at all 5 positions on the offensive line. How do you see Leighton Von Brandt, who, by the way, has an awesome name for an offensive lineman? I just had to get that out there. That is a name of a player built to play in the trenches. Yeah. But how do you see him?
I see him a little bit similarly. I don't know that I see Leighton Von Brandt as as pure of a left tackle as maybe some of the guys they've gotten in past years. Will Black, Grayson McHugh. But honestly, they got Grayson McHugh and Will Black. I don't know that a pure left tackle is a need. I think he can play left tackle. I really like him at right tackle. As you see from his film, he plays on both sides. But I like him at right tackle. If he can't play right tackle, he can move inside, or in an even more positive manner, if there's a faster pathway to him getting on the field at guard, like we saw with Gerby Lambert this year, I absolutely think he can move inside and be a pretty darn good guard as well. But I like him on the perimeter. I think there's some technical things. He's got to bend a little bit better. But you saw in that last clip, Trev, real nice feet, long. He's got real heavy hands. Like that's good quickness there. I just need to see him bend more. And he looks a little tight in the hips. That's a bit of a question mark for me, but it's not. It's like it's what keeps him from being the number 90 player in the country instead of the number 50 player in the country kind of thing. All the other tools are really good. So I think you need, in order to stack up another elite class after another elite class, I think that's why you need to make sure that you're getting guys like Albert Simeon. And look, one position that, 2 of the positions that you're looking at right now are must-gets because they're positions where you have been loading up and now it's about remaining up top. Because look, you get real complacent when you say, well, they got the number 1 roster in the country in 2026, which you and I believe to be true. And we're not alone. There's a lot of people that think they're one of the 3 best rosters in the country, 4 best rosters in the country. You got elite offensive line talent. But if you don't keep recruiting that way, then in 3 years, you're like, oh, well, man, we let our roster slide a little bit. We're still really talented, but we're not as talented. Perfect example, Georgia. So I think that's why it's so important that you get those guys. And then the other position is receivers, more about you landed a great class last year. Can you do that consistently? On top of the need for those specific players, can Mike Brown land a second straight big-time class? And if he can, then I think that shuts up a lot of the concerns that people have about him as a recruiter. And we can now just focus on, the job he's doing as far as developing the players and putting talent on the field and all those type of things. So I think those are a lot of reasons why those. And like tight end, same way. Like, look, yeah, you're doing great right now, but you got to keep rolling. You got to keep this thing going. That's where I'm at.
Brian, let's dive into the defensive side of the ball here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And right now we're talking about the must-get recruits in the 2027 class. We just got done talking about the offense. Real quick, before we dive into the individual players on defense, can you give us a quick recap of like what must-get means for this class? Because it can have different meanings.
Yeah, for defense, it's a little bit different than the offense. There's obviously the things that matter, that matter on offense. You're trying to, you'd like to have the moral victory of a highly ranked class by the services. I don't think it matters from a practical standpoint. As we pointed out yesterday in our show, the recruiting rankings don't determine how good teams are going to be, because Notre Dame's 2 best classes, or two most impactful classes on the current roster, were not top. They never higher than 10th. Even though I think I don't know that anyone would disagree that Notre Dame is outside the top. Like, any real analyst is outside the top 5. I think there's legitimate debate about whether they're number 1. And we said this the other day. We think they're number 1, but if somebody wants to argue Texas or Ohio State or Oregon, I'm not going to be like, erroneous. No, I'm not going to have that debate with you, right? Like, okay, I get it. Like, here's why I think Notre Dame's number 1. Here's why you think this is number 1 or number 2. Cool. They're in the top 5. If somebody's like, no, they're not top 5, they're behind this team, I'm like, okay, now you done it. Now you've poked the bear. It's time to roll. So I don't think those things matter. But there is some, I also would be foolish to say that there's not benefit to having a highly ranked class from a sales standpoint. When you're trying to pitch fans to be excited, when you're trying to pitch future recruiting classes, look what we're doing every year. You know what I mean? Like, you want to keep this thing rolling, right? Like, you want to be the guy in this class to help us get to this level, that kind of thing. So there's parts of that, Trev, that I think are beneficial. But for defense, it's more so about, in my opinion, it's stacking classes in an area that you have not proven to do so yet. And then the other ones are, you do actually have some future roster needs in this class, more so than offense. I don't think the offense is in a position anywhere where I'm worried about the numbers in a couple years. There really isn't. You will if you fail to recruit adequately the next couple years, but like, there's nowhere where I'm like, you have to address this. It's more, just keep doing what you're doing. There's two positions on defense, linebacker and safety, where if they don't do well in this class, I am concerned about the depth at that position in a couple years. And so that's why I looked at. So it is a little bit different than the offense, Trev. And then, of course, the other part that's the same as on offense is you're looking for difference makers. You're looking for game wreckers. You're looking for guys that you're going to be better even than you are now because you landed this player, you know, outside of whether it was a need or not, you know, because like you could say, well, you had two great defensive end classes in a row. Okay, so we want to have a third. It's more so about like, look, you need game changers because not every 5-star pans out. Not every top 100 guy pans out. Some guys get hurt. And even if they do all pan out, great. Then I've got 5 studs instead of 3. That's the way I look at it. So it is a little different than the offense in certain areas, but overall, it's still just about these are the guys that are going to help you reload your roster and make sure that once again, you have one of the best recruiting classes in the country and you've met your needs.
Let's talk about game changers then. And one of the game changers in the 2027 class is defensive end Abraham Cisse. This is a kid that we've broken down his film before, but man, every single time we turn it on,
we're going to play it again.
Can't help but be impressed.
We're going to play it again.
Sure will.
You know, I love this kid, Trev. This is another kid I like. Look, there's a couple reasons why Abraham is a must get for Notre Dame. The first one is obvious. He's an elite talent. He's got as high of a ceiling as just about any defensive end in the country. 6'5", 220, freakishly long arms, elite first step, plays with a great motor. I mean, he's got as good a tools as any DN that you could find. He's a big-time talent. There's another reason why is that what this team has not shown in a long time. They've shown they can land big-time defensive ends. What they have not done, Trev, however, is show that they can stack big-time defensive end classes together year after year after year. They have not shown that. Last year's defensive class was tremendous. The year before, a little bit more of a question mark. Although it was great, there was a huge play that Joe Reif made in a video that they put out the other day. Did you see that? There was a goal line play. Joe Reif made a huge stop at the goal line against the first-team offense, by the way. That was awesome to see. But you don't have, like, I don't think anybody, even people who like Joe Reif more than others, which is me, I don't think look at him and say, oh, yeah, he's a future top 25 draft pick. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Riley Mills is a great player. He wasn't a top 25 draft pick. You know what I mean? He was a phenomenal player, but you can watch him and then you can watch a guy like Chase Young and say, these two things are not the same. Doesn't mean Riley wasn't great. Doesn't mean he wasn't important. Doesn't mean he didn't deserve his All-American award. But you can watch him and then let's use a D tackle and then watch Ndamukong Suh and say, these two things are not the same. You know, so you want to be able to get more of those elite guys year after year after year. I love that catch, by the way. That's the play Trev keeps liking to talk about. Every time we talk about this, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right, Trev. The one play he makes as a tight end, that's the one you want to focus on. But in all seriousness, what that play shows is elite athleticism and football playing ability. Yeah, he just knows how to play football. But you got Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer last year, Utade last year. Can you stack defensive end classes? Can you do that or not? And that's something, honestly, that Notre Dame has not done in a while. And so getting Abraham, to me, assures that you've now stacked two classes in a row. Yeah, you'd like to get other guys like him in the class, but I just need one elite end in this class. And if you get two, that's even better. But right now, I have some thoughts on the other end position later. But for right now, the 27 guys that we know about, he is that absolute number one must-get player for all those reasons. And he plays a premium position. That's the final piece. Right? What are the premium positions on offense, Trev? What are the two most premium positions on offense? Quarterback and left tackle. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so that means the premium positions on defense are the guys that influence those two positions, D end and corner. And you could throw D tackle in there. He's a premium position with elite talent, and again, he's a Notre Dame kid. Values the academic piece of things. He's a Northern kid. You got to start dominating the North. You have to. And there's a lot more kids coming out from up north lately, Trev, at premium positions. And Notre Dame's got to start getting those kids when they come along. And Abraham Cisse, in every sense of the word, and every way you could even possibly think of must-get, is a must-get for the Notre Dame defense.
Agreed completely. Like we've said, we both love his film. He does a lot of things naturally, and he just adds that star power potential to the 2027 recruiting class, especially on the defensive line. But he's not the only one, Brian. There's a couple of other defensive linemen that we want to talk about. Let's kick it to the interior and talk about Chicago native Braden Parks. He is a kid that Notre Dame really has to get in this upcoming class.
Yeah, I think Braden's a must-get, and he's my number one must-get for a couple reasons. I don't know that I'd rank him as like the very top defensive tackle on the board for Notre Dame. I think you could probably make a case that there's a couple guys that maybe have more talent, and Marcus Fakatu is probably my number one ranked D tackle if I'm just going with the recruiting ranking. But there's a couple reasons why Braden Parks to me is a must-get. And number one is, honestly, it's just you've invested a ton of time in him and you really want him and you've got to be able to close. It's a statement like Notre Dame's got to recruit Chicago well, which means you can't invest 2 years in a recruit from a private school in Chicago who's an academic fit. Can't lose that kid. Trev, you can't. You got to get that kid. And I understand, like, you've had some things come up. You have a new position coach and all those other type of things, a new defensive staff from when you first started recruiting him. I get all that stuff. But the reality is, when you have a kid like this, 6'3", 300 pounds, powerful, productive, he brings that beef that you want to keep adding more of to your football team. I mean, he shows up day one, and he's one of your 3 or 4 biggest defensive linemen. You know what I mean? And he's powerful, long arms, disruptive. He doesn't just eat up space. He made 20-plus tackles for loss last year, which is especially impressive when you consider A, he plays in a tough league, and then B, he has Cam McGee taking stats away on one side, and he's got King Liggins taking stats away on the other side of a D tackle who signed with Illinois this past year. So, there's a lot of clips you'll watch on film where Braden Parks and Cam McGee are arriving at the quarterback about the same time, and when you're doing that, you're a pretty impressive player. He's not going to really help you win the rankings battle. Nobody has him in the top 100, but in my view, he's a top 100 player. And I've said that for a while. He's a guy I think you have to get in this class. Now, look, if you get David Fuller-Runshoe and Marcus Fakatu and you don't get Braden Parks, am I going to be like, screw Charlie Partridge, you couldn't get Braden Parks? No, but I don't know the odds of that happening. I'd rather have all three. But I just think getting Braden Parks to me is incredibly impactful for this team, and also shows that the investment the last 2 years that you made in this kid is going to pay off. Again, if you lose a kid that you want who's from a private school in Chicago, I get a little bit nervous about your ability to close on top defensive linemen with some consistency.
Yeah, he's one of those players. I think Sean Davis was the first one that told me about this, but he's one of those players that's like out the box. He's ready to go the second he gets on campus, something that you were talking about. He steps on campus, and he's one of the biggest players in your interior D-line. And I think that's huge. Notre Dame needs to start attracting more players like that. We hear all the time stories across the country, players who start making impacts as true freshmen. And the 2026 class is starting to do that. I think the roster in front of them is very loaded and making the path a little bit more difficult. Talent's never a question. Braden Parks is going to be one of those guys. Very interested to see how that goes.
And I would argue, Trev, that you are correct about that. But I think that defensive tackle is a position where younger players will still have a pathway to come in and play early when you look at or in their first year or two. Because, next year you're losing Onye, you're losing Elijah Hughes. The year after that, you're losing Francis Brew for sure. You may lose Tion Gray. Like, you're going to lose over the next couple years a lot of your defensive tackle depth chart, and that's assuming some of the younger guys don't transfer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you do have that ability to sell that in this class too. On top of just the fact that, like, dude, you're a great fit here. Like, you were meant to play at a place like Notre Dame.
Agreed with you completely. Now, there are two other guys that you did briefly mention. You mentioned Marcus Fakatu and David Fuller-Runshu. It's, one of them, I'm assuming, to go along with Braden Parks is the must get.
100%. Yeah, I think you have to get that second stud D tackle in this class. Third is the dream class, right? Like the dream class. Everything goes perfectly as you get Braden Parks, David Fuller-Runshu, and Marcus Fakatu. That's the dream scenario. If it doesn't happen, it's not a failure. I do think you need – I don't know what's going on with my throat clogging up today. I do think you need a second one in this class, though, because this is like defensive end. This is not a position that you've really recruited with any kind of consistency over the last 2 years. The two pure inside guys that you got in the 25 class have both suffered a lot of injuries since they've gotten to college or had some in high school, in Gordy Solstad's standpoint. I think Gordy Solstad has a lot of talent potential. I've talked about this for years, Trev, but he's also had two devastating, like, long-term injuries so far. One in high school, and he's had, a bunch of different things. Well, I shouldn't say devastating. He's had a bunch of different things happen in Notre Dame, and that's why he's been out all spring. Another injury. So I think when you look at that and say, boy, that's a kid who couldn't afford to necessarily miss a bunch of time. And he is. And so, like, that's going to make it a lot harder for him to reach his full potential as a player. And that's with him being a boom or bust type of guy anyway. Davion Dixon, what kind of player is he going to be? We'll see. But they're good players with some tools, but they're not elite guys. They're not top 100 guys. They're not, Davion Dixon, if he pans out and he's the player we hope he could be, can give you like an Elijah Hughes, Jared Dawson type of impact, which is great. But who's your Riley Mills? Who's your Stephon Tuitt? Who's your Lewis Nix? And that's what this recruiting effort is lacked in a lot of years. That's why you had to go out and get Tion Gray and Francis Brew this year and move Chris Burgess inside. Part of that is his body kind of forced you to move. But that's kind of been your saving grace, is that Chris Burgess has been able to move inside. They were not planning on him being a D tackle when they recruited him. They were not thinking he was going to be 300 pounds by the spring of his freshman season, and a legit 300 pounds. Not like he ate too many, he spent too much time on Eddy Street, eating fast food. Like, that's not why he's 300 pounds. He's just physically, his body said, okay, we're ready to go. You've got to have a second class in a row, to me, of stacking an elite defensive tackle class. And that's why I think you need one of Fakatu and Fuller-Runshu. And they're both kind of similar to Braden Parks in that Fakatu's a guy you put a lot of time in and invested a lot of time in trying to get him. Been recruiting him for 2 years. You were his leader at one point in time. And then you've lost your way because of the coaching change. It is what it is. What's interesting is there's a lot of people that are making a push for him, and Notre Dame continues allegedly to fall down the list for him. I've heard some things that maybe they're moving in a good direction with him, but the visit for him when he comes on campus, I think next weekend, is going to be huge. If you don't come out of that visit feeling like you're right back at the top, then I don't know you're going to get that kid. So this visit next weekend is going to be monstrous. You've got to get one of those two players, in my opinion, for me to truly say, to go with Braden Parks, for me to say, okay, they're stacking classes now. That's where I'm at.
Let's kick it back to the secondary and talk about a safety from California, Gavin Williams, who, when you pop in the film, you understand why he's a must-get player. You talk about stacking classes. I think Mike Mickens laid a perfect foundation for what it means to stack defensive back classes at Notre Dame. But a player like Gavin Williams keeps that streak alive under the new regime with Aaron Henry stepping in. He's a very, very talented player and one that should be at Notre Dame.
There was a time not that long ago where I felt Notre Dame was his leader, and I thought they were very close to getting him. USC has come in with a big NIL offer. I think they're basically just trying to buy him. I'll be honest with you, in my opinion. I think they just don't want him to go to Notre Dame. I think that's a big part of it. Hopefully Gavin kind of sees through that a little bit and realizes kind of why Notre Dame was the school that he was trending with in a good direction. The obvious reason why Gavin Williams is a must get is because he's your top safety on the board. You've already got a real good safety commitment from Khalil Terry. Your safety depth chart is not great in the future. It's great right now, but Adon Schuler's a senior. Tay Johnson's a junior in school. Luke Talich is done after this year. Ethan Johnson is a sophomore. Brandon Logan is a baseball player right now, and we haven't really seen him make much of an impact in football right now. Joey O'Brien's an elite talent, but Trev, you're going into next year right now at best with what, 4 true safeties on the roster right now that aren't true freshmen? 4? That's assuming that neither Adon Schuler or Tay Johnson goes pro. It's Adon, Tay, Ethan Johnson, Brandon Logan, and Joey O'Brien, right? But like again, right now, I don't know Brandon Logan's football status because he was injured and he's playing great in baseball. Like I haven't seen him play football yet. So yeah, you got 5 players, but only 4 that I'm like, okay, confident that those guys are going to be on the football field. And if you lose one of those guys to the NFL and possibly both, now you're really in trouble. So on top of Khalil Terry, who they already get, was a very good pickup, but like, is Khalil Terry a pure safety or is he kind of a safety nickel like Nick Reddish, who's more of a nickel than a safety? We'll find that answer out. I like Khalil Terry more as a pure safety than I do Nick Reddish. So I do view him as a safety. I don't know how the staff views him. And when I say I don't know, I genuinely mean I don't know. I knew how the previous coach viewed him. I don't know how Aaron Henry views him. But we know how they view Gavin Williams. You have to get at least 2 really good safeties in that class. You have to. You got one in Khalil Terry, you got to get Gavin Williams. Now, there's some other good safeties on the board, and I personally would like to see them bring in 3. They just had a safety on campus this past week in Greedy James. They've offered another safety recently. And if you don't get Gavin Williams, I question whether the safety class is going to be as good as it needs to be. I do. And you look, you didn't get one last year because it wasn't a great safety class. But now you're like, okay, but don't worry, you can move corners. But do you really want to have to move corners? It's fine to move a corner because, hey, we're deep there and this guy needs to get on the field, so let's move him back to safety. That's one thing. But when you move a guy to safety because, oh, shoot, we're low on numbers, we have to move him, that's not a good place to be. So I do think the safety depth chart is a little bit on shaky ground beyond 2027. And it could be shaky beyond 26. The reason I say beyond 27 is because until we know what their plans are, you have to work with the possibility that Tay Johnson and Don Schuler are both back. Because we don't know that they're going pro. We have our feelings on it. So that's why I say I can't tell you for sure beyond 26 that they're going to be in trouble. Beyond 27, I know for a fact that Don Schuler's not going to play at Notre Dame in 2028 because he's not eligible to play Notre Dame in 2028. And I'd be a little surprised, barring injury, if Tay Johnson is here in 2028 as well. So, and in 2028, Joey O'Brien will be a junior. Can you guarantee he'll be on the team in 2029? You get what I'm saying? Like, you have to look at those things when you're putting recruiting classes together. And that's why I think it's imperative that they get 2 future starters at safety. They got one in Khalil Terry. They got to get another one. And the best one on the board by far is Gavin Williams.
Agreed 100%. It's one of those scenarios where it's like prepare for the worst, hope for the best type of thing. You play out, what is the best case scenario, but you build your roster around what could potentially be a very empty safety room, and Gavin Williams definitely fills a lot of those holes. I'm with you completely. Yeah. Are there any other players in the 2027 class on defense, Brian, that are considered muskets?
Specific players? No. And that's a bad thing because they have to have a good linebacker class. I don't have a clue who they're going to get a linebacker right now. Not a clue. I think a lot of people are just assuming they're going to get Sean Fox because he's an in-state kid. But the school that just won the national championship that offered him before Notre Dame, that's been recruiting him longer than Notre Dame, is a whole lot closer to his hometown of Indianapolis than South Bend is. And that's obviously Indiana. Do I think they can get him? Sure, I think they're in the battle. Do I think it's a given just because they offered an in-state kid? Absolutely not. I don't have a clue who they're going to get linebacker to go with Amari Irvin. Not a clue. I like Amari Irvin, but he can't be the only guy. And you only got 2 linebackers in last year's class, and one of them showed up injured. So, and then the previous year's linebacker class with Madden Faremo, you had Anthony Saka, Ko'okia. You've already lost one of those guys too. Do you really want to be in a situation where you're only landing 2 linebackers a year? I don't know if that's the place you want to be. So you have to get one more safety in this class to go, or one more linebacker in this class, like high-level linebacker. So my 5th must-get player is some unnamed impact linebacker that we don't know that's going to pick Notre Dame yet. There are some guys on the board. Noah Glover would be that kind of player, right? I think it's Jakeem Gouda would be kind of that guy. Caden Henderson would be that guy if he visits and if he falls in love with Notre Dame, which is possible. I'm not holding my breath. I don't know who that player is going to be, Trev. They just offered a kid from North Carolina the other day that I like a lot. You've got to figure something out. You can't just get Amari Irvin, who I like, and then some solid prospect who might be okay. You've got to hit it big in this class. Linebacker recruiting, I think, is behind the 8 ball even more than any other from a coaching standpoint, because there was a lot more turmoil there. Max Bulla left. Then these kids start talking to Al Washington, who's going to be their new linebacker coach. Then he leaves, and now Brian John Marie steps in. So Brian John Marie got put in a much tougher situation than the other 2 position coaches. I think Max Bulla did a lot of great things at Notre Dame. If we found out that he knew he was leaving 6 months ago, it would not shock me with the way that they put this 27 recruiting linebacker board together. I had no clue what they were doing. So whereas like D-line, it's like Charlie Partridge walks in a situation where you've got Braden Parks and Abraham Cisse and some of these guys already on the board. Secondary, you've got 3 kids committed when Aaron Henry shows up. You've got Gavin Williams, some of these players on the board. Zayden Gamble, guys like that on the board. Linebacker, it's like, who's on the board? Well, I don't know. Besides Amari Irvin, I don't have a clue who's even on the board right now. And then they went out and visited a bunch of kids with Al Washington, and they haven't followed up on any of those guys because clearly the new linebacker coach doesn't really think highly of those players, which is fine. I mean, don't recruit guys just to get numbers. That doesn't address the problem that I'm talking about, right? So I think Brian Jean Marie was put in a really tough spot, but that's why you get paid the big bucks. You got to rebound and figure it out. And we're in April, signing days in less than 8 months. You got about 7.5 months to figure it out. There's a world in which that's the one big question mark going into the fall. And the potential success at linebacker could have a lot to do with whether or not he can flip someone down the road. That's a possibility. But hopefully between now and July, they can find somebody and land somebody, because you need at least one impact player. If your third guy's like I like that kid. He's got some talent. He's got some potential. That's great. I think they need 3 linebackers in this class, but you need at least a second player, and that guy's got to be a difference maker. The potential to be a difference maker. So I don't know who that player is, Trev. And that's not a good thing. And honestly, part of the reason I don't know is because when I have conversations with people in Notre Dame, they don't really know. They know who they like right now, but they're not like, oh yeah, we're going to get that guy. We're going to get that guy. We're going to get it. Like, well, we're trying, but we're behind the 8 ball. And that's a bit of a concerning situation for me.
Understandably so. I don't envy to be in certain aspects, especially on the recruiting trail. I don't envy the task ahead of Brian Jean Marie, but like you said, about 7.5, 8 or so months until National Signing Day. So very interested to see how it closes. And I'm hoping that it's strong. I'm with you completely. Brian, in the next part of the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're switching gears and we're talking national topics. And on the docket for right now, we're ranking our top 10 college football coaches, active college football coaches, ahead of the 2026 season. And a window in, Brian, this was a from a name standpoint an easy list to put together. Where they fell individually was a little bit more difficult, but just the names, it was easy to come up, off the top of your head. It's, Yeah, Marcus Freeman, Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, Kurt Signetti. But once you had to start ordering them, it became a little bit more difficult. So we based it on really three main criteria. And this is what you sent over to me when I actually called you, little window in, peek behind the curtain. I was like, look, man, I'm struggling getting these rankings together. And so the criteria that Brian sent me over is we're going off of recent track record. So like the last 3 years, because there's some coaches on this list that have been head coaches at collegiate programs for like 4 years total, and then others that have been on head coaches in college football since like the late 2000s. And so it kind of helps filter it out a little bit. The second criteria is the ability to build top rosters presently and down the road, future recruiting classes. And then obviously third, you have to factor in the overall history. That comes into play with some of the coaches, especially one coach in particular that we're going to be talking about that's in both of our rankings. So that's the three main criteria for you guys all to keep in mind when we go through these rankings. This isn't if I were to start a football program today, who would my head coach be? My answer is going to be Marcus Freeman, but he's also not number one overall on my list for a lot of the reasons that we listed out in the criteria. So, Brian, I'm excited for this one, man. This is going to be a really fun discussion.
This was probably the toughest coaching ranking that I've done, because what was the struggle for me, Trev, was there are certain coaches that I have in my top three that honestly I don't think are three of the best coaches in college football. And so we had to create some sort of standard, because look, you have to have some criteria. You just can't go off my gut feeling, right? That's a terrible way for like people that want to say that they're legitimate analysts are do rankings. Like, well, I like this guy more. I feel like this guy is this or that. That's a pretty terrible way of recruiting, of evaluating the ranking, Trevor. So we had to have some level of criteria. So we come up with this criteria, and it's really about looking at the most recent track record first. And then getting into, okay, this is the track record, but let's also expand it out. So I use like a 3-year view. Obviously, your most recent season matters because it helps determine what direction you're going. But this, like, too many rankings are just basically like, who was the best last year. That's the problem with too many of these national rankings. Whereas I look first and foremost what you did the last 3 years. Then I expand it to 5, and then I'll use the most recent year as a tiebreaker if it's close, because I want to look and see what a coach is what's the trend line for a coach. And then the final piece is you have to include the entirety of their careers. As long as I don't put a lot of stock in something that someone did at 3 schools ago. But like a guy like Dabo Swinney, who's been at one place for as long as he has, that matters to me. Bill Belichick's coaching career does not matter to me. 7 Super Bowls. He's got the most impressive resume of any coach in college football. It's not even close. Kirby's like, I got my 2 rings. Bill's like, I don't have enough fingers on my hand for all mine. You know what I mean? Like, but this is the NFL. Nobody cares. It's a completely different animal. Just like if Kirby Smart goes to the NFL with his 2 national championship rings, nobody's going to give a rip. Like, so what, bro? You did that in college. Might as well have done that in Pee Wee football. This is the National Football League, man. You know what I mean? Nobody cares. So how do you factor those things in? And then come up with a ranking. And then also for me, there's a subjective aspect of that I'm going to talk about in my analysis of, are these coaches getting the most out of what they're doing? And it's almost impossible to incorporate that into a ranking entirely, because there's so much subjective aspects of what is the roster, what's the potential of a program. But I have some thoughts on some of these things that made my ranking of my top 5 very difficult, because I have some guys in my top 5 that honestly, if I was starting a program and I couldn't have Marcus Freeman, I wouldn't want. And I'm going to talk about those. So we're going to have a very interesting conversation here, Trev, and I'm looking forward to having it. But just so people know, we are going to do our top 10 rankings, and then we're going to have a sort of a second coaching show that I'm very much looking forward to, which is we're going to talk about some different superlatives. We're going to talk about underrated coaches. We're going to talk about overrated coaches. We're going to talk about coaches that are in sort of a prove-it year for just taking that next step, or is this is who you are? Hey, we think you're a heck of a coach, but you've reached your ceiling, or are you going to go up? Can you go down? Was the last year an anomaly or whatever, or you're not on the hot seat yet, but if you don't do something this year, you will be. We're going to talk about, we get a lot of questions about, who are some up and coming coaches. And so we're going to have some talk about that. And then we're going to have some talk about the hot seat. So we'll kind of more rapid fire those other ones, Trev, but I am very much looking forward to that because we won't be talking about Lincoln Riley in the top 10 coaches rankings. I can promise you that, but we will have some things to say about Lincoln Riley when we get to the superlative area. So I am very much looking forward to that one, Trev. But
as am I.
Let me ask you this. Which one did you find more fun to put together? Was it your top 10 or was it some of those other superlatives? Because I kind of enjoyed the superlatives one a little bit more because I didn't have to worry about ranking them. It was more of an emotional thing.
Yeah, I enjoyed the superlatives one as well because, like I said, when I was putting together the top 10, the names were easy to come up with. It was just more so what order do I put them in? The superlatives, it was we didn't have to rank them. It's like, okay, this is the number 1 coach with the most to prove, and this is the number 2 coach with the most to prove. It's just what names do we believe it to be? I'm with you. It was a little bit more emotional, and I got a little bit more carried away with that one. When I made my top 10, I made like 12, like I put together really like 12 names. But for some of these, like in the up and coming coaches or coaches with the most to prove this upcoming season, I think my initial list, at target was to get like 3 to 5 names. And I think under the category of most to prove, I think I sent you over my initial list, which had like 9 guys on it, and so it's like, hey, Brian was like, hey, I get it. I'm excited too. Let's cut down on these or
let's go 5. We're going to go 5. Yeah.
Yep. But, it was interesting to put the top 10 together with mine, Brian. I'm curious to see how you saw this on yours, but there's clear tiers in my top 10 list based on the criteria that we're evaluating this on. So like my tiers, it's like, based on what we're evaluating on, there's my 1 through 3 coaches and then a separation, my 4, 5, and 6 coaches, and then there's a separation. And then there's a gap in my 7 through 10 compared to the rest. So that's how I viewed my rankings, not as coaches that I like or who I'd start a program with, but just based on the criteria.
It's accomplishments, right? Exactly. Trev, I want to, before we dive into that real quick, I just want to pull this up real fast. This is from Brandon Rouse, who's been a member of the IB community for a while now. So we appreciate Brandon. But Brandon goes, shout out to me. Went back to school a couple years ago. Husband, father of 4. I graduate in May. Praise the Lord. Proverbs 3:6. Great show, guys. Man, that is amazing. Brandon, I am very happy for you, man. I know that cannot be easy. My wife went back to school when we got married. She went back to school, and it was a challenge as an adult to go back to school, you know what I mean, and deal with that. But she was married, but no kids, so that was that I can't imagine doing it the way that you did, man. By the way, Proverbs 3:6, this is according to English Standard Version, which is the Bible the translation that I use. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths. He will make straight your path. So, Brandon, that's awesome, man. Congratulate you on that. Absolutely. I can't wait to hear how that went. I'm curious, where'd you go? And what are you trying to do? Like, what led you to do this? I'd love to hear the backstory, man. But we're happy for you, and we want to praise that, man. So, absolutely. So I wanted to bring that up before we move on to the coaches
rankings. I'm with you, brother. I'm with you. Brandon, congratulations, bro. That's awesome. Very happy for you and your family. That's spectacular. Well, folks, like we do most rankings on this show, we're going to snake it. I'll go 10, Brian will go 10, so on and so forth down the line. And getting us kicked off here, I'll start it with top 10 coaches, and we'll go 10 to 1. Obviously, you don't want to reveal number 1 to get the show started. And my number 10 coach, Brian, is one that Notre Dame fans have a lot of familiarity with, and that's head coach Mario Cristobal for the Miami Hurricanes. And look, when you look at the criteria of how we evaluated this under, you go back and look at what he did the last 3 years. He has a 30-12 overall record. Obviously, last year played for the national championship, and they were arguably a game away from being in the college football playoff in 2024 with one of the best offenses that they've had in the better part of a decade with Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo and all of those kids. So Mario Cristobal made the list for me. He's 10th because there's more for him to prove along the way for him to be higher on this list, but he has a great foundation for it. Great defensive coordinator. I think he's starting to stack recruiting classes. They bring back another loaded roster in 2026. They had the number 8 recruiting class in 2026 per the On3 industry rankings, and currently has a number 6 recruiting class right now in the 2027 On3 industry rankings. And then you look at what he's done on paper. Signature wins last year, including a win over Notre Dame, and then obviously what they did in the playoffs over Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Ohio State. And look, I'll be the first one to say I was not high on what Miami was set up to do in the upcoming season. I made jokes about it, cracked jokes about them playing in the Citrus Bowl. I thought Notre Dame was going to beat them by double digits, and I'll own all of that.
Yeah.
But I would be remiss if I said, well, that's just because of Carson Beck or just because of Mark Fletcher. Mario Cristobal got that program turned around. He made the correct hires, and he's one of those coaches that's on the rise. Right now, he's number 10 for me.
I'm going to talk about Mario in a minute, Trev, but I want to say one thing. That right there, that last part, that's what got him moved up the rankings for me. It wasn't even the semifinal run because Sonny Dykes isn't on my top 10. He made the semifinals or the championship game recently. It was what led to them winning the championship or getting to the championship game. And I think you nailed that. My number 10 is Lane Kiffin. And this is the one that we had a difference of opinion on. You have another SEC coach on here, which I'll let you talk about when we get there. But I have Lane Kiffin on mine. And Trev, I'm someone who has felt for a long time that Lane Kiffin is a very overrated coach. And I said so. I said going into the 2024 season, and I said it again in the 25 season, and he had a lot to prove to me. The thing he had to prove to me the last 2 seasons was we know Lane can have some good seasons. He's had good seasons. You go back to 2011 at USC. I remember watching them come in and whoop Notre Dame's butt in a night game when Notre Dame introduced the new gold helmets. Went 10-2 that year. That year was surrounded by an 8-5 and a 7-6 season where he lost to Notre Dame in both years. Then he gets fired in his third year, goes to Florida Atlantic. First year, everything's great, 11-3, win the Boca Raton Bowl. Second year, they go 5-7. Third year, 10-3. Leaves for Ole Miss. Go 5-5 his first year, 10-3 the second year. Get to the Sugar Bowl. Lose, but get to the Sugar Bowl. The next year, 8-5, disappointing season. The next year, 11-2. Win the Peach Bowl. I think they beat Penn State that year, Trev, if I remember correctly, in the Peach Bowl. The problem with him up to that point in time was consistency. And Lane is a very immature person. And that led to a lot of immaturity with his football team. He's not a very disciplined person. That led to a lack of discipline with his football team. But the 23 season was not typical up and down Lane Kiffin. It was the start. Now looking back, it was the start of a great run. And we haven't seen that same lack of maturity in the same degree. Now, I would argue that the 10-3 record in 2024 was an underachievement relative to the talent they had on that football team. You could make a case for that. But going 10-3 in the SEC, even when the SEC is not elite, is still a very good season. And then you bounce back with what they did this past season. And I understand that Ole Miss did not play a super strong schedule, but it was strong enough, Trev, that you look at and say they had some great wins that season. They had some very, very, or at least some very good wins last season. Mainly going on the road and outplaying Oklahoma for 60 minutes. Oklahoma was competitive, but Ole Miss controlled that game from front to start. Or from start to finish, front to start. That's the same thing. That means they won warm-ups. From start to finish, they dominated. You know, a gritty win over LSU before LSU had packed it in. You know, went on the road and lost to Georgia, but that was a very competitive football game, more competitive than we've seen them, you know, play at Georgia in past seasons. Then they, you know, whooped South Carolina, you know, beat Florida in an ugly game, but a game they won, dominated the rivalry game. Then Lane leaves, obviously, and they go on the run that they went on. But even before you look at the run, that 11-1 season, that was a good, impressive season where they had a lot of ugly wins. And they had to battle through some wins. You know, ugly win over Kentucky, ugly win over LSU, ugly win over Arkansas. But that actually showed me something because this was not nearly as talented of a team as he had the year before. And they still went 11-1 and beat some in the fact the whole they won ugly. Yeah, that's not something Lane Kiffin's teams have done a whole lot in the past. They don't win ugly. They usually lose those games. So that consistency showed me something, Trev. It really did. So I think his record could maybe justify him being a little bit higher. I still have some questions about his consistency and maturity, but it's only in that it drops him to 10. I can't justify having him outside of the top 10 with the way he's done. And I think he's done a really good job of showing he can build a team through the portal and it not be a bunch of personalities. He can get guys on the same goal for, even if it's just for a season. And that's imperative in this day and age. There's a lot of coaches that can recruit talented portal players and can't get them to play together. What Lane showed the last 2 years is, to varying degrees, he can get them to play together. And that says something to me.
Oh, I think that's fair. Lane was very, very close to my list, like you and I were talking about before. Like I said, I put together a list of 12 guys, and he was 11th. And just for how I started to evaluate a lot of this, but he was very, very close, and honestly has a very strong case to be ranked in the top 10. I'm with you there. I'm with you. My number 9 coach, and this one might be questioned by some because of the recent track record, but my number 9 coach is Dabo Swinney from Clemson. He's still in my top 10 for what he has done historically. To Brian's point, he's only ever been a head coach at one place, and that's been at Clemson. Look, their run from 2011 to 2022 was nothing short of historic. He was 142-24 during those times, 2 national titles, played for it a total of 4 times, won 2 of them, made the college football playoffs in 2015, 16, 18, 19, 20, and then obviously most recently in 2024. Here's the knock on him and why he's not higher on this list. If this was just like a history lesson, he would be significantly higher, but it's not. It's evaluating also where they're at now. The fact of the matter is he underperformed the last 3 seasons, even during 2024 when they won the conference. They got blown out in every good game that they played against an opponent not named SMU, and even in that game, they almost blew that lead in the ACC championship game. Then obviously they get to the playoffs, and then they're getting a lot of credit, a conversation that Notre Dame fans are familiar with under a previous regime of, well, we only lost by this. We were competitive for a little bit of this. And that's shades of what Dabo used to be in press conferences in the past. Hey, look, we look to contend for national championships. Driver of the Roy bus. Nobody thought we could be here except for us and the people in this room. Now that tone has changed a little bit, and he's talking about, hey, we're winning conference championships still. What's up? It's like, yeah, in the ACC. Sure. And then they didn't even play for it in 2024 or in 2025. So the conversation for him has changed a little bit, but I still think Dabo Swinney's a top 10 coach. I'm going to talk about him a little bit more in later parts of the show, but by and large, Dabo Swinney is still a top 10 coach in college football, going into a big year this upcoming season. But right now I have him at number 9 on this list.
My number 9, Trev, is Mike Elko. And Mike Elko is a guy that I had a bit of a tough time ranking, because he still has one of the more incomplete track records of any coach on this list. Now, you could say, well, hold on a second. He's going into year 5. I'm pretty sure you're going to have Marcus Freeman and Dan Lanning on your list. You're correct. And matter of fact, they're both in my top 5. But here's the difference. We've seen those 2 guys 4 years at the same school, where Mike Elko's only been at a place twice. But Here's my argument for why I think Mike Elko is a top 10 coach. So recent track record, last 3 years, last 4 years, he took over a Duke team that went 3-9 the year before. Actually, if you really he took over a Duke team that had gone 3-9, 2-9, 5-7 in the 3 years before he took over. Not a good team at all. And in his first year, they win 9 games. In his second year, Duke starts the season off very well, Trev. They start the season off, 4-0, beat Clemson, lose a barn burner to Notre Dame. Blew out Northwestern, blew out UConn. They were looking good. Lose a great game to Notre Dame, bounce back the next week against NC State. But something happened in that Notre Dame game that kind of doomed their season a little bit, and that's Riley Leonard going down. They just could not recover from that. End up losing to Florida State, lose to Louisville. They don't score a point. They lose to North Carolina, lose to Virginia, rally a little bit at the end, beat Pitt and beat Troy. But when you're at a place like Duke, you're going to have a hard time losing a kid like Riley Leonard. And we saw how valuable he was the next year when he transfers to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame goes 14-2 and plays for the national championship. So I look at that and I say, that is getting as much as you possibly could out of Duke. He goes to Texas A&M, and in his first year, he pretty much does what every other coach at Texas A&M does. Starts off well, loses to a really good Notre Dame team, and then wins the next 7 games. Beat Florida at Florida by 13. Beat Arkansas, a rival on a neutral field. Beat number 9 Missouri 41-10. Beat number 8 LSU 38-23. Climbs all the way up to number 10. First year, top 10, baby, Texas A&M. And then what happens, Trev? The month of November reminded him that he's still at Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Lose at South Carolina by 24. Beat New Mexico State. Lose in overtime to a bad Auburn team. And then get outclassed by Texas before losing a bowl game to USC, and you finish 8-5. Disappointing, right? So then he bounces back the next year. They go on the road, beat Notre Dame. This year they beat Auburn in an ugly game, but beat Auburn. Then they blow out Mississippi State, convincingly beat Florida, have a tough road game against Arkansas, which everybody except Notre Dame had a tough game against Arkansas. Blow out LSU on the road, blow out Missouri on the road, elite comeback against South Carolina. And that game, more than any other, said Mike Elko's tenure at Texas A&M is different. It's different because that's the moment where the season collapses for the last 20 years. That's the moment the season collapses. You're down 30-3, and your season is basically going down the tubes. Another A&M collapse. And that team, he did not let that team quit. They rally back. They end up winning that game, bounce back the next week and beat Samford. They go on the road and lose to Texas, but they battled in that game. It was different than what the previous year was. And then they lose to Miami, which shows they're not there yet. But you look at what they did last year, combined with how much he achieved at Duke, and then what he's doing on the recruiting trail right now, I absolutely view him as a coach that can build a big-time roster and knows how to coach. He's got to stack some more good seasons against a little bit more competitive schedules for me to move him up the list. But the success he's had in his 4 years as a head coach, Trev, has Mike Elko in my top 10. And if we were going to do like arrows on all these guys, Lane Kiffin, to me, arrows pointing up. Mike Elko, arrow definitely pointing up. Now it's about, okay, now let's stack some of these seasons together, because that's going to determine whether Mike Elko goes up on my list next year or drops out of my top 10. But right now, certainly trending in the right direction.
For a lot of the reasons that you just listed off, Brian, Mike Elko is my number 8 coach on my list. I agree with everything that you said. He's made them a relevant contending program again. And you go and you look at what FanDuel has over for the odds to make the playoffs this upcoming season, and Texas A&M has higher odds this year to make the playoffs than what does Alabama, than Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Michigan, USC, Penn State. And look, I understand it's just a betting service, but the point remains. 2 years ago, Texas A&M is not in this conversation. But I'm with you with everything that Mike Elko has done, because especially when you look at his resume as a whole, he's turned around 2 programs that were considered lukewarm or, in Duke's case, non-existent as college football contenders. They went 11-2 last year, which is their best record, Texas A&M's best record since Johnny Manziel won the Heisman in 2012, and it's not close. It's not like they have a bunch of 10-win seasons sprinkled in there. They went 11-2 in 2012, and then it was a lot of 8-5, 6-6 seasons like that. Mike Elko came in and did what he did at Duke. Picked up impressive wins last year. They made the playoffs. They beat Notre Dame in Notre Dame Stadium. They beat LSU on the road, Missouri on the road. And to your point about staying hot on the recruiting trail, they're number 1 right now on On3's industry ranking for the 2027 class, and they had the number 7 ranking on On3's industry ranking for 26. I'm with you on Mike Elko. Not much more to add there, brother. It's just he's changed the trajectory of that program, and I think he's absolutely a top 10 coach in college football this year. I'm with you completely.
Let's do that with all these guys. Let's do a arrow. Where's the arrow pointing with these coaches? I think that's a little bit more fun. Let's do that. I like that. I'm going to go with my next guy. My number 8 guy is Mario Cristobal. There's a couple reasons why Mario Cristobal is here. Number 1, obviously, he was last season jumped him into the top 10 for me. He wasn't in my top 10 last year. He was a guy that I thought was a little bit overrated last year. But here's what this does. Here's why. I thought he was very inconsistent at Oregon. I didn't think they played to their potential most years at Oregon. 12-2, 10-3, beating up a not great Pac-12, losing a lot of big games. there was not a lot of excitement about where he was when his tenure ended at Oregon. There was not a lot of people losing sleep that he left in 2021. Let's be honest about that. Comes to Miami, and yeah, the program's a bit of a mess. Obviously the year before they'd gone 7-5 under Manny Diaz. The year before they were 8-3 the year before that under Manny Diaz. 6-7 the year before that. 7-6 the year before that. 10-3 the year before that. He comes in his first year, has a worse record than any of those in the previous 4 or 5 years. A worse record. They go for 5-7 in his first year and had some really bad losses, Trev. I at least would consider, look, Notre Dame fans can't make fun of losing to bad teams early on in a coach's tenure, right? We can't really do that. Marshall, Stanford, Middle Tennessee is a different animal, though. I'm sorry. It's just a little bit of a different animal. Middle Tennessee was just, that's not a great win. But it's not even just the loss. It's the fact that they got pounded by Middle Tennessee, lost by 2 touchdowns. Not a good look. Got blown out by Clemson that year. Go to 2023. They get a little better, not much better. They have a big early win against A&M, who ends up not being good. Their wins that year, they beat Miami of Ohio, beat Bethune-Cookman, beat Temple, beat Clemson in overtime, which is a good win, beat Virginia in overtime, got spanked by NC State, lost to Florida State, lost to Louisville, beat Boston College, and then got beat by Rutgers in a bowl game. Not a great start for Mario. They did bounce back in 24 and had a nice 10-3 season, and we've argued, we thought they should have been a playoff team, at least over the SEC teams. If you don't want to put them in, fine. But if you're not going to put another team in, or if you're going to put another team in, it shouldn't have been Bama, who would have been the next team in. It should have been Miami. Have a blowout win over Florida. You win convincingly the next few games. You have some great comebacks against Virginia Tech and Cal. Shouldn't have been behind before. But anyway, then you go on the road. You have a great win at Louisville, blow out Florida State, blow out Duke, and you climb all the way up to number 4. And all you have to do in your last 3 games really is just go 2-1 against Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. And they went 1-2. The one thing you couldn't do, including blowing like a 20-0 lead. So that put a little bit of a damper on it, and I wasn't fired up about it. But I have to admit that when you look at what he did the offseason and what the 25 season looked like, there's one big difference between A&M's win over Notre Dame and Miami's. I feel A&M's win over Notre Dame was fluky. You have things that happen in that game that don't happen if you play again in November. You're not going to have an 85-yard touchdown when you're down big when 3 guys miss a guy at midfield. You're not going to win some of those jump ball situations in that game when Tay Johnson wasn't on the field, because Tay would have been on the field. You're not going to have, you're off. Notre Dame's off. There's just a lot. You miss an extra point. There's a lot of fluky stuff that happened. Miami would have had an easier time repeating why they won than what A&M did, because they just physically beat Notre Dame up in the trenches. That said something to me about Mario Cristobal's football team. That was a weakness for them his first 3 seasons, was trench play. They were talented, but they couldn't play that way. And then they kind of had their middle of the season let down again. Some guys were banged up and all that, and you're like, oh, kind of like, here we go again, But then they rallied and they finished strong and needed to not only win the rest of their games, but win impressively, and that's exactly what they did. They go to the postseason. They beat Texas A&M on the road. They beat Ohio State on a neutral field. They beat Ole Miss on a neutral field, and then played Indiana down to the wire. Miami was on the verge, I thought, a couple times of, okay, I think this game's about to get out of hand, and every time Miami had an answer and battled Indiana in that game. Now when you put 24 and 25 now back-to-back, that 24 season looks a little better, in my opinion. That's the beginning of an upward trend. They're recruiting really well in high school. They're doing well in the portal. But here's the final piece to me that is what really jumped Mario. The sign of a great coach is not just wins and losses, because you can go 10-2 and underachieve. It's, can you recognize deficiencies in your program and address them? And when I looked at Miami, incredibly poorly coached defense and not physical in the trenches, underachieving talent in the trenches. And in one offseason, he completely changed that. He brings in Corey Heatherman. They practice different. They go about their business different. Their offense is Shannon Dawson, same OC, does a complete overhaul of how they play offense. Not so much from a scheme standpoint, but like, we're going to lean into playing big boy football. We're Miami. We're the U. We've got to go play in the trenches. We've got talent. We're going to be that physical football team that doesn't back down from a fight, something that Miami had not done in the past. That's a sign of good coaching to me, not just fluky that year. I mean, Carson Beck. Carson Beck was average for them last year until they got into the end of the ACC season. He was great down the stretch against bad teams. But they got there because the Corey Heatherman hire, because of a shift in emphasis on how they just go about their business, and because they finally played big boy football for the first time in a very long time. You got to give Mario Cristobal credit for that. And the way they're recruiting, the arrow's pointing up for Miami. He now has to give me a third year of this, and he'll jump up even higher on my list.
Agreed with a lot of what you said, man. I'm with you. My number 7 coach, I had a very, very, very hard time with this one, and it's Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. Here's why I had a hard time with this. There are facets of his resume that put him in the top 10. He's made the playoffs twice. He played for a national championship his final year at Washington, which falls in that 3-year window. You know, he's led Alabama to a 20-8 record. Here's the hardest part about Kalen DeBoer for me. The fact that he is trending down. If we're doing arrows for, the directions of coaches, and I don't love the direction that Alabama's going, and I've been very open about that so far this offseason. And could they bounce back? That wouldn't surprise me at a program like Alabama, but he's underperformed there. And no, I'm not talking about, compared to Nick Saban. That's not a job that I envy anybody in. There are coaches that we're getting ready to talk about here over the next couple segments that, I would love, if one day they were a coach at Notre Dame, if Marcus Freeman were to ever leave. But I don't envy the person that's following up Nick Saban, the best coach of my generation of college football. I don't. That is such a hard, difficult task. But with that being said, what am I talking about with underperforming? Well, he's 20-8 in 2 years at Alabama, and he does have some notable wins. I'm counting Georgia in 24 more as a notable win. I'm not counting their win over Georgia in 25 as a notable win. You did it in Athens. You ended their win streak. That was a big one. But then on the stage where it mattered in the conference championship, you lost by 21 points. It's kind of that same discussion we talked about how, Oregon beat Ohio State in 2024 by 1 point, and they got blown out in the postseason. It shades of that. But for me, the biggest thing is it's how they've lost. It's how they've lost games, and I'll dive more into that in some later segments. But when I look at Kalen DeBoer's career overall as a whole, he's had some notable wins. They beat Texas in the CFP semifinals in 2023 when he was with Washington. But I'll say this about Kalen DeBoer. Out of everyone on this list that I have, he could be the first one out after this season, depending on how that goes. That's my biggest thing with him. That's why it's such a hard time placing him. Because I felt like if I left him off, it's like, dude, because the trend with mine too, I think this is more of a coincidence than it was an intentionality. But every coach on my list has played in the college football playoffs, coached in the college football playoffs. And so I leave a guy off like Kalen DeBoer. It's like, okay, so a guy that is coached in a national championship game in the last 3 years, made the playoffs in another year. We can have questions on if they should or should not have. I'm sure you guys know what our stance is on that. But fact of the matter is they played in a playoff game, played for a national championship in another, have a win in one college football playoff semifinals. I leave them off of this list. But then you start talking about what Alabama's been the last couple of years. That's why it's such a hard time placing him. 7 is the absolute ceiling that I see for Kalen DeBoer. And honestly, he's closer to being off of this list for me than being any higher than 7. But as of right now, that narrative changes. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But I have Kalen DeBoer at number 7.
My number 7 is Dabo Swinney at Clemson. Trev, I get why people have him lower. I get why you have him lower. There's a couple reasons why he's still high for me. Number one is I still think the track record over the course of 3 to 5 seasons is better. Mario Cristobal has a losing record in the last 5 years. He has disappointing seasons as well the last 5 years. Mario's 2024 season was good, but Dabo's is better. Dabo has won 2 ACC championships in the last 5 years. Mario Cristobal has won none. So yeah, he gets credit for taking them to the title game. At the end of the day, 0 championships, conference or national or anything. It's just 0. Hasn't even played in the ACC championship in his 4 years there. So I can only go so far with some of these other coaches. They got a little bit more to prove. In the last 5 years, Dabo's had disappointing seasons. They've still had 3 10-plus win seasons in the last 5 years. Now, the arrow's trending down with Dabo. A year ago, I would be one to bet if we went back and looked at last year's show, I probably had Dabo in my top 5. Definitely trending down. This past season was bad. There's no spin. That was a bad coaching job. That team had way too much talent to be a 7-6 football team. Way too much. No excuses. No, well, here's why. Here's the justification. It's okay to let it. It was just a bad job. Was it any worse than Mario going 5-7? Was it any worse than Elko's team collapsing at the end of the 2020? You know what I mean? So when those things are also prominent on other people behind him's resumes, that's when the big picture part comes into play for me. And that's why I still say I got to have Dabo here, because not only has he won 2 ACC championships, more than any other ACC coach the last 5 years. Not only has he done that, but he's also been in the playoff once the last 5 years, same numbers Miami. And we're still within the last decade of him winning a championship. Now, his first title is now outside the 10-year window. His second isn't. It's still in the window. I mean, in the last 10 years, Dabo has still taken his football team to the college football playoffs 5 times. I can't just pretend that doesn't exist. Completely, meaning dropping him out of my top 10, which you didn't, Trev. This isn't a comment to you. We're haggling over 2 spots. Arrow's definitely trending down. The reason that I have still Dabo here is because there are still too many black eyes on these 3 coaches behind him's records and resumes that makes me say I'm not ready to put them up just because they made the playoff 1 year sooner than what he did. I mean, Mike Elko lost in his 1 playoff game, just like Dabo did. So that's kind of where I'm at. Is now if you were to ask me next year, will Dabo be ahead of Mario, Mike, and Lane? No, I don't think he will. But I've got to give him at least a year of a bad season for me to completely write him off. Because prior to this, Trev, his worst year since 2010 was 9 wins in 2023. And in that year, beat Marcus Freeman. You know what I mean? So I'm not ready to drop them yet. Drop him too far just yet. This season, he's not in my prove it category because I don't want to put a lot of coaches in there twice, but it is a big year for Dabo. They've got to bounce back and be a minimum 9-10 plus win team for him to stay in the top 10. You're still Clemson. You still have resources. You're not handling the current era well. You're not here because the current era is such that you can't compete in it. You're not handling the current era well. And that's why he's fallen out of my list. 3-4 years ago, he's my number 1. At worst, number 2. So it's definitely trending in the wrong direction, but I just couldn't justify dropping him below those other coaches just yet.
Dude, I think last year he was like my number 4 coach. I get it. I'm with you completely. I understand. I do. My number 6 coach is Steve Sarkisian at Texas, and he's the head coach of a program that up there with Notre Dame, they're one of the favorites to win the national championship on FanDuel. And when I look at what Steve Sarkisian has done since he's been at Texas, he's turned that program around, especially in the last 3 years. He's gone 35-8 the last 3 seasons, including 2 appearances in the college football playoff semifinals, obviously back-to-back years in 23 and 24. Prior to his arrival in 2021, Texas was 48-39 from 2014 to 2020. They were very much a lukewarm program. It took him some time. He didn't have the Kurt Cignetti effect that he had when he walked in at Indiana, and they were immediately a playoff team. They were a 5-win team in his first year. And then once he got his feet under him, got his staff figured out, got his recruits in, they've become a perennial power in college football. And my hat's off to Sark at Texas. Now, all of my coaches, 4, 5, and 6, they all have a gripe to be 4, 5, or 6. And I'm very open in talking about that. And Sark is one of those guys. They're remaining hot on the recruiting trail. They had the number 10 class in 26, according to On3's industry rankings. And then they currently have the number 12 in the 27 On3 industry rankings. And we know how quickly those things can change, given the day or what new evaluation comes out. I use that term loosely going back to the show that we had earlier. But look, man, Steve Sarkisian is a top 10 coach in college football, and he is closer to cracking the top 5 than he is being out of the top 10. There's some things that he has to figure out, just like every coach that I have 4, 5, and 6. And arguably, outside of the top 3, and even they have things they have to figure out. Mm-hmm. Everybody on this list has stuff to figure out, but Sark is close. When we did the show a couple weeks ago talking about programs and teams that are like on the cusp, Texas is a part of that. And no team is successful in spite of their head coach to this degree. There's been Notre Dame teams before in the past that overperformed and went 9-3 or 10-2 in spite of something. But
Brian
to
Kelly.
be a national championship favorite and a perennial playoff contender under a head coach, you don't do that in spite of him. So I have Steve Sarkisian at number 6.
The battle between Sark and Dan Lanning was a close one for me. And here's a couple things about Sark. Number one is you talking about he wasn't able to turn it around the way Indiana did. It was also a different world.
Yep.
You know, like you're completely right. It was a different world. They couldn't bring in this big transfer portal class. But when I look at Sark, there's a couple things for me. Number one is I just view his teams the last 2 years as kind of not playing to their full potential. And the 24 team that went to the semifinals, I don't give him as much credit for that as I give, honestly, some of the other coaches that have gone to the semifinals or Final Four, like Marcus Freeman, for example, had to beat Indiana, Georgia, and Penn State to get to the championship game. When Texas went to the semifinals 2 years ago, they had to beat Clemson, who's a four-loss team, right? 3-loss team, and Arizona State. That's who they had to beat. Literally, they had to beat the 2 lowest-ranked teams in the playoffs. 2 teams that had to win their leagues to even get in the playoffs. You know what I mean? Like Arizona State finished 12th, which means if they didn't win their league, they fall back. Or if it was just, like it was this year, just pure top 12, they're not in. Because, well, actually, they would have been in because Boise would have been ahead of them. But they'd have been in as 12. Texas would have only played them. So, I think the way that they've gotten kind of beat up in the trenches kind of bothers me. They've had some bad regular season losses. That's another reason that I went with Lanning. Lanning's got some losses, but Lanning's losses in the regular season, like to Indiana, like teams like that. He doesn't have like that loss to 4-8 Florida. You know what I mean? Like those are the things that we haven't seen from Sark. But I think in some ways that's why Sark gets a little bit overrated for me. I think that sometimes people put too much hype on him when in reality, I don't know that he's living up to his full potential as a coach. But I also think in some ways Sark gets too much criticism and people want to dismiss the success they've had. When your down year at Texas in the last few years is 10-3, you're in a pretty good, healthy place. Where down years in other years for guys is 5-7, 6-6. So I think Sark is trending in a good direction, but the fact that they continuously get beat by the top teams they play, like the Georgia, they can't beat Georgia, they can't beat Ohio State. Like I know Texas had a lot of ranked wins in the last couple of years, but my question is, what's the ranked team that they beat that had better had better players than Texas? Wasn't Michigan in 24? Wasn't Oklahoma? Wasn't Vanderbilt? They got blown out by Georgia in 2024, 30-15. It wasn't Vandy. It wasn't Texas A&M 2 years ago. And then they play Georgia again. Georgia's starting quarterback gets hurt at halftime, and Georgia's trailing, and they lose. It wasn't Clemson, and it wasn't Arizona State. Yeah, they played Ohio State tough, but they still lost. And then you come into this season. The team that really, I would argue, the only team they played that can match them for talent is Ohio State, and they lost. Then they lost to Florida. They had a great win over Oklahoma. They've got better players in Oklahoma. They've got better players in Vanderbilt. They've got better players in Texas A&M, and they got better players in Michigan. The only other team they played with equal talent, Georgia, beat the crap out of them. So I had that question for both Dan Lanning and Sark 2 years ago. I feel like Lanning has given me enough winning, over Penn State, which had a loaded roster, beating Ohio State at home. Those are big wins for Oregon. And I don't know that Texas has those, where you could say they beat a team with a roster on their level or a roster that's maybe even better than theirs. And I would say that they have done that. So that's what separated these two coaches. But I think Sark is in the territory now as a coach, Trev, where we're pretty much locking down 10-win seasons for the next few years, in my opinion. The question is, can he have them be more consistent where they can win the SEC and make a deeper run in the current format into the playoffs? But it was really close between him and Kalen and Dan Lanning, excuse me. But it's that part. There's more bad losses and not as many legit good wins, in my opinion. You beat a bunch of overrated SEC teams that ended up not being ranked as high as they were, or shouldn't have been as ranked as high as they were. I'm sorry, I can't look at beating Vanderbilt the same way that I look at Dan Lanning beating Ohio State or Penn State. I just can't, and so, I know they beat a top 10 Oklahoma team, Trev. I think everybody in this chat knows what our feelings of that top 10 Oklahoma team. That's not even close to being the same as beating Ohio State a year ago, who eventually won the national championship. It's just not. That's closer to be like Oregon beating USC last year, in my opinion. It's closer to that than it is to beating Penn State or Ohio State the year before. So that's really right now what separated the two. Both excellent coaches. Sark's done a great job there. But I have to kind of give the nod to Sark. So as we round out our top 6, like 6 to 10 or bottom 5, 6 to 10, I think that's why you got to find some separators between two really good coaches. And what are those separators? That's it to me. But I do think Texas, to me, is a team that I wouldn't say the trend line is up because they've been good for 3 years now. I think it's just the arrow's it's level. What direction are they going to go this year is going to be very interesting for Sark.
Agreed. We see that very much the same. So Sark was your number 6 coach as well.
I guess I probably should bring that up. Yep, there it is.
Good deal. Like you've talked about, and we see this very much the same as well. Dan Lanning at Oregon was my number 5 coach. And a lot gets said about Dan Lanning. We've talked about him quite a bit on this channel. And some of it's warranted. I get it. But, when you take a look at what he's done, it's clear that I think that he's a top 5 coach in college football. He's 38-5 in the last 3 years. He's only lost to 2 teams the last 2 years. Obviously 3 losses because they lost to Indiana twice in 2025. Both teams that he's lost to the last 2 years have gone on to win national championships. He won the Big Ten and won undefeated in the regular season in his first year in the conference. And then since he's taken over Oregon, they've had a 10-win season every year since 2022. We talk about building for the future. Their recruiting power. They had the number 4 class in 26 on threes industry ranking. They currently have the number 7 in 2027 and on threes industry ranking. A lot of good has come out of the Dan Lanning era at Oregon. Now, one of the things that's preventing him from keeping him higher, one of them is the exits. I agree that, and this is what I had a hard time to kind of back up your point of what you're talking about. I had a hard time too going back and forth between Lanning and Sark. And it was like, okay, what's the worst loss? Getting absolutely blown out to a really, really good team or losing to a bad team?
Yeah, to me, it's always. I'm sorry. This is your segment. Go ahead, Trev.
No, you're good, man. You were about to take the words right out of my mouth. I agree with you completely, bro. To me, it's always the bad team. It's losing to the bad team because sometimes, especially with Oregon in 2024, you ran into the buzzsaw that was Ohio State. That was doing that to every team that they played in the playoffs outside of Texas. And again, where they still won by 14 points, albeit it was closer than the final score indicated. But yeah, I'm with you. They beat the brakes out of Tennessee. They beat the brakes out of Oregon. And yeah, the final score looked closer against Notre Dame, but at one point it was 31-7.
Yep.
And so that was something that I went back and forth with, but that's by and large nationally. Those are some of the big things that plague Dan Lanning is, you're going to go lose by 44 again in the playoffs. No, you're going to go lose and get blown out by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl again. And I understand those conversations, but when you look at his resume as a whole and what he's done so far since taking over up in Eugene, I really like a lot of the things that Dan Lanning has done. It was a close battle. I'm with you between him and Sark, but I have Dan Lanning edging it out to crack the top 5 at 5th.
Here's the issue so like to me, I don't think that there's much of a difference between I don't think there's a close gap between Marcus Freeman at 4 and Dan Lanning at 5. And this is kind of an issue. I'm not saying you did. I'm just giving you my thoughts. I think there's a very clear number 4. I think number 1 and 3, debatable. Number 4, I think is absolutely one person. Then there's who's 5 and 6. Those 2 guys are debatable. Because here's the thing that Dan Lanning and Steve Sarkisian have not shown me they can consistently do. Can they beat top coaches? Now, Sark has that one huge win over Nick Saban in Alabama a few years ago. That was different era, different team. That wasn't a great Bama team, but that's now a while ago. Somebody in the chat pointed out 0-3 in his last 2 years at Oregon, and Kalen DeBoer's last 2 years at Washington, 0-3 against Washington. You come into the Big Ten, you haven't actually had like real tough schedules. You beat Ohio State once, got crushed the next time, lost to Indiana twice, but you did beat Penn State. I think that Dan Lanning has to prove, Trevor, that he can win those, like Sark, that he can win those games where the talent is equal or even maybe inferior to the other teams. The difference is he has won a couple of those games. One was against Ohio State. That was a huge win. No selling that. Beating Penn State, you beat another coach who has the same problem you do. You know what I mean? You have. And so that doesn't mean a whole lot to me. When I look at Dan Lanning and I look at the rankings that I have and I look at the top 5 coaches, he beat Ryan Day once and he lost to Kirby Smart. He beat Ryan Day once, 0 for 2 against Cignetti, hasn't played against Marcus Freeman. And when I look at the top 4 coaches, I don't see any wins for Steve Sarkisian. But I see Marcus Freeman with multiple wins over coaches in that group. The only school he's had a hard time with is Ohio State. He's beat Indiana, beat Georgia. So those things factor into it. What gives me Lanning the edge, the other thing that gives Lanning the edge over me is the consistency. And the fact that they both left weak leagues for good leagues at the same time. And Oregon is ascending where Texas was good first year and then took a step back. That little difference can determine whether or not you are 5 or 6 for me. Like you said, Dan Lanning has never had less than 10 wins. Trev, the 10 wins is significantly his worst season too. I mean, they've won 12 in at least 12 or 13 in the 3 seasons since. And that means something to me. And so you go 26-3 over the last 2 years. You've lost as many games the last 2 years as what Sark lost last year. And your losses are to the teams that have won national. Literally, he has not lost to a team the last 2 years that didn't win the national championship. Because he lost to Ohio State and then two losses this year in Indiana. That means something. And those are the things that separate these two coaches. And I would say with Oregon, I'd say with Dan Lanning, I do think the arrow's pointing up. I think they were better in his second year in the Big Ten than they were in the first year. They're recruiting very well. They've got a lot of talent coming back. They've shown that they can recruit high school well still. They can recruit the portal well. So I do think Dan Lanning has certainly proven that he belongs in the top 5, even though I do think there's a little bit of separation between him and the 4 in front of him.
Yeah, the number 4 for both of us, obviously, if you guys haven't pieced it together yet, is Notre Dame's head coach Marcus Freeman. You can look at what he's done over the last 2 years. Last 3 years, really, he's 34-7. Played for the national championship in 2024, and many argue, and I also argue, that they could have in 2025 if it wasn't for the snub and if they would have handled business when they should have. That's a very fair conversation to have. They had the number 1 recruiting class in the country in 2026. Then currently on On3's industry rankings, they have the number 8 in 2027. Excuse me. Both teams he's had this is the best team, that he's had in South Bend from top to bottom since he's taken over. And that included having rosters with players like Joe Alt and Audric Estime and Ben Morrison and Xavier Watts and Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Malachi Fields. This is an insane roster from top to bottom. You want to talk about ascending up in the right direction. Marcus Freeman is pointing about as north as you possibly could be, in my opinion. I'm with you completely. I won't harp on it too much because I know he's your number 4 as well. But Marcus Freeman is a top 5 coach in the country, and he's definitely not 5th.
I think this is another program where I'd say the arrow is trending up here in this conversation. Marcus Freeman in debating his ranking with like Lanning, what's Lanning got it over Freeman? Well, the overall record is better, but that's in my opinion more so because of what Lanning did his first couple years compared to Marcus Freeman's best 2 years. If you would have ranked them after the first 2 years, there's no brainer that Dan Lanning is ahead of Marcus Freeman. But I look at the last couple years and I do think that that's what separates the two. And the other thing that separates the two is when you look at Notre Dame and you look at the number of ranked wins they've accumulated the last couple of years, people don't want to give them a whole lot of credit for it. They want to constantly dog the schedule because that's what lazy people do. But in 2024, Notre Dame beat 7 ranked opponents, including 4 that were ranked in the top 15. And then obviously you go into the postseason, you beat Indiana by 10. Beat Kurt Cignetti, who's going to be ranked in a little bit. You go in New Orleans and beat Kirby Smart by 13, a coach we're going to talk about in a little bit. You beat James Franklin in the semifinals, a coach that a lot of people had in the top 5 going into that year, and then you lose to Ohio State, which has been your kryptonite. If Marcus Freeman could beat Ohio State, we're having a very different conversation about where he ranks in this list. But because he can't beat Ohio State, that's the thing that keeps it to where there's separation between him and the top 3, on top of the fact that those 3 guys have won a championship and he is not. But even if like that to me is a big thing, that let's just say hypothetically that Texas beat Ohio State the year before, and say this year Indiana gets beat by Ole Miss or something, something like that, Miami or Bama or something like that. I'd still have them ahead of Freeman because like Cerignetti could say, well, I beat Ohio State, yeah. So I think that kind of factors into it a little bit for me. And so when I look at Freeman, I think he's every year answered some questions about what he can and can't do. First, it was they had those weird letdown games. We didn't have that in 2025. The 2 quote unquote letdown games were losing to 2 playoff teams by combined 4 points. There was no Northern Illinois. There was no Louisville. There was no Clemson from 23. There was no Stanford or Marshall from 2022. Not only that, they didn't even really play any competitive games. Like BC was probably about as bad as 2022 Stanford was, and Notre Dame played like crap and still beat them by 15 points and never trailed in the game. Very different outcome from that. Same thing with Northern Illinois. So I think answering those questions is been something he's done. More wins over teams on your level than what Dan Lanning or Sark has had. When you look at Penn State, Georgia, Indiana, I wouldn't put Texas A&M there from 24 just because I don't think that game 1 under Elko, but it's a tough place to play. So, and then of course what he's doing on the recruiting trail. Marcus Freeman has to the issue I've always had is people saying you can't recruit an elite level at Notre Dame. I've never said it's not harder. I just said it can be done. And I was tired of people blaming and making excuses for not doing it. It's a lot easier to recruit at Texas and Oregon than it is Notre Dame. No one will deny that. But Marcus Freeman has recruited every bit as well as Dan Lanning and Steve Sarkisian has since he's been hired, really. Because again, you can talk all you want about where Rivals or 247 rank those teams, but I'm telling you, look at what those players have done. Look at what those classes have accomplished and the talent coming out of those classes. And now you'd go back and tell me that those classes weren't as good as what Texas and Oregon brought in. And I'll say, bull. You know what I mean? So when I look at Freeman, it's not just the championship game run from a year ago. It's a lot of it. It's 3 straight double-digit seasons. It's the dominance with which we saw this team play this year. Notre Dame needed to win one of those first 2 games. And that's why Freeman's not even getting considered for the top 3. But the stretch of dominance that we saw after those 2 wins is more dominant than anything I've seen from Oregon or Texas over that long of a period of time the last couple of years. And that's why Marcus Freeman is number 4, and the arrow is, in my opinion, trending up. And I think the other thing that Marcus Freeman has done, I have less questions about his coaching hires than I do the other coaches. Although Chris Ash could prove me wrong, I think Dan Lanning has made some very good hires on his initial staff. He's made some very good hires on offense. I've questioned his defensive coaching hires. I just have. And we'll see if that changes. Whereas the questions that the questions that we had proved to be legitimate. I didn't love the Al Golden hire, but it got proven to be correct. I didn't love the Chris Ash hire, still don't. But the guy also had a top 10 defense last year, Trev. And we've never seen a Chris Ash defense go out and give up, coaching the game where they lost by 30. I'll take the A&M game over losing 56-22 in the playoff semifinals. That's kind of where I'm at. So when you're splitting hairs between really good coaches, I think that's what gives Freeman the edge. The ranked wins, was it the last 2 years? What's 25? How many ranked ones did they have this year, Trev? So they had two ranked wins this year. So in the last 2 years, Notre Dame has had 9 wins over ranked opponents. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That ain't too bad. And FanDuel's expecting them to get a couple more this year too. And they're projected to go undefeated. And if ESPN's way too early rankings hold up, they're going to play 3 ranked teams. 2 of them are in playoff contention. Yep. So that's going to continue that trend. I'm with you. My top 3, and this was the reason why I called Brian, because I had so many questions about it. My top 3 I had a very, very, very difficult time with because I thought it was very, very close. But my third coach in here in my top 3 is Kirby Smart at Georgia. When I look at everything that he's done, I mean, it's clear that he's a top 3 coach in the country. The question was just where. If we were just strictly talking longevity and only looking at his career overall, I think Kirby Smart would be my number 1 coach. And even in the last 3 seasons, I don't want to paint this picture like I did with Dabo, where it's like, back in like 15 through 20, he was unbelievable. But since then, he's been Kirby Smart in the last 3 years has gone 36-6. But then when I look at, building talent for the future, things like that, his rosters the last couple of seasons have taken a step back. We're getting farther and farther away from like the back-to-back natties in 21 and 22. And believe me, I'm not one to dismiss national championships. I haven't witnessed a Notre Dame one yet. It's also why Marcus Freeman isn't in my top 3. But when I look at Kirby Smart compared to the other 2 coaches that I have remaining on this list, the 2 other coaches that I have between Ryan Day and Curt Cignetti have won national championships more recently. I'm a big fan of the state of their roster. Georgia's turning around, though, which is why he's still 3rd for me. Even with some of the questions that I've had about Georgia's roster the last couple of years, they've still played for the SEC championship every year that he's been at Georgia, except for 2. That was like his first season, and then I think in 2020, they also didn't play for it. But Georgia, by and large,
the COVID
is still
year.
Yes, exactly. Georgia is still, by and large, a class of the SEC. He's made the playoffs every single year that it's been expanded. In 24, they just ran into one of the teams that ended up playing for the national championship game. And then 25, I thought it was a very competitive. I thought they played Ole Miss more competitively than what they played Notre Dame. And they ran into that Cinderella story-esque type of team with Ole Miss. They lose their head coach, their offensive coordinator is there, but then he's not there, but then he's there. And they have a quarterback from a D2 college, and they kind of just ran into that team. But I would also be remiss to say it's also the same as the 21 and 22 team, because I don't think either of those teams would have had an issue beating Ole Miss. And so Kirby is still a top 3 coach in the country for me. When you look at his resume in its entirety, it's just taken a step back recently. And again, if a step back is still winning your conference, and that conference is the SEC, and you're still making the playoffs, I'll take that step back. I will. That's why overall Kirby Smart is 3rd for me. It was very tough for me to put him at 3rd, but that's where I have him for now.
My number 3, Trev, is Ryan Day at Ohio State. And obviously there's a big gap between my top 3 and my number 4. And there's absolutely a debate to be had about who should be 1, 2, and 3. And so I look at the last 3 years. Obviously Ryan Day has done a great job. Curt Cignetti's done a great job, and Kirby Smart's done a great job. In the last 3 years, the one thing that Ryan Day has over Kirby Smart is he's won a national championship. But again, it's not just the most 3 years. It's also, then I expanded to 5 and beyond. In the last 5 years, Ohio State has won 1 championship and Georgia's won 2. Kirby Smart also beat Ryan Day in their only head-to-head matchup, which carries a little bit of weight when you're trying to separate your top 3 coaches. I would also argue, Trevor, that Ryan Day has done less with more in recent years. And I know they won the title in 24, and shout out to them. That's a great title run, but would an Ohio State fan in November of 2024 be sitting there saying Ryan Day is a great coach? Why? Because they kept saying he's not getting as much as he should out of the talent that they have. They just went 10-2 with an elite roster, best roster in college football. They lost to Michigan. He lost to Sharon Moore. And then obviously had another regular season loss. Almost lost to Nebraska. And that's a bit problematic. And then this year, I just saw Jordan Reed release his top 300, I think 500 prospects for the draft. Had 4 Ohio State guys in the top 10. And that team went 0 in the postseason this year. 0-2. Lost the Big Ten title game to Indiana, and then lost to Miami in the semifinals. So that is a separator for me. And sometimes when we get in these situations, we can focus on the negatives of a coach more so than the positives of coach, because you're trying to say what separated the three. But look, I don't like Ryan Day. I really dislike him in a lot of ways. But here's what you can't deny. Whether he's wasted talent, not the reality is, though, Trev, they've gone 37-6 the last 3 years and have a national championship. What's wild is, in the 5-year stretch that we're talking about, he's yet to win a Big Ten championship. Crazy. Like, that means something to me. You had that great year where you went on that run, but like, what about those other years? He won all 4 playoff games in 2024, but in the 2 years, before, since, and then the year since, 0 for 3 in the postseason. It's got a very weird resume. But at the end of the day, they're recruiting at an elite level. Every time I question a hire he makes, it turns out to be a great hire. You know what I mean? Like, he's made very good hires. I didn't think that the hire of Matt Patricia was a good hire. And what did Matt Patricia do in his 1 year? Built the best defense in college football. I mean, Ohio State didn't lose to Indiana or Miami because of their defense. You know what I mean? Like, Miami scored 24 points, pick 6. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't lose that game because of their defense. So that ended up being a great hire. I have to give him credit for that. So I think Ryan Day is his track record is what it is. We could debate all day long. Is he just kind of benefiting from still building on the program Urban Meyer created? That's debatable. Have they had more teams that have disappointed than the one great year? Yeah, you can argue that, but you still can't. Whenever you say outside of the championship season, comma, okay, end of sentence. Actually, outside of the championship season, there's a lot of coaches that would love to disappoint outside of their national championship season. A lot of coaches that would love for you to say, well, outside of that 1 year that you won the national title and had to beat Notre Dame, Texas, and Oregon to get in Tennessee to get there, outside of that, you've been disappointing. I would love for someone to say that about Notre Dame's coach. Outside of that one national title run, you know what I mean? You only went, 22 and 23-4. Like, oh, you bum, you deserve to be, drag it out in the streets. I'd love to hear that. And you can't take that away from him, Trevor. All the little nitpicks I have about Ryan Day's tenure, you can't take that away from him. And they didn't their title team wasn't a fluke. They dominated 3 of the 4 teams they played. And when push came to shove, Ryan Day's team was tougher in the big moments than what Sark's team was in the big moments of the one competitive game they had. Can't take that away from them. And this season, with a brand new quarterback and new look offensive line, brand new D coordinator, they still went 12-0. And still their only losses were the teams that played for the whole thing at the end. That's it. You can't take that away from them. And so that success is why I have Ryan Day third. But I think there's a case to be made for why he's third and not higher. And that is because I think I would contend that when I look at the 5-year window, I still think the resume for Kirby in a 5-year window is more impressive than the resume for Ryan Day. And same thing with Curt Cignetti. I would argue that as well. The argument to me is more, should Day be ahead of Cignetti? And I'll explain why I don't here in a minute. But that's why I have Ryan Day number 3. Still without a doubt ahead of me. You can't argue that Marcus Freeman belongs over Ryan Day because he's 0 for 3 against Ryan Day. It's end of sentence. End of period. No more discussion.
Yep. Agreed completely. My number 2 head coach on my list is Curt Cignetti. I had to separate my personal feelings about him because I've not been shy about saying I just don't like him. I don't.
You're not alone.
Like, it's just, it is what it is. But when you evaluate him as a football coach, the dude's insane. He is. And he's gone 38-3 the last 3 years. And that includes a 16-0 natty year in 2025. And he did it by turning around Indiana. Perennially the worst college football program in the history of the sport. They were like the first team to 700 losses. Like, they had just this insane bowl drought Not national championship drought, not New Year's Six bowl drought, not playoff drought. I'm talking a bowl drought of winning the Cheez-It Bowl. And Curt Cignetti stepped in, and in less than 365 days, took him to the college football playoffs. His 3-year stretch includes an 11-1 final year at James Madison. And then the following year, he took IU to the college football playoff and an 11-1 record in the regular season. And then to follow that up, he went 16-0, had the Heisman winner at quarterback, and then won the national championship. And then on the way, they beat Alabama. They beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. They beat Oregon twice, once in the regular season, once in the semifinals. Curt Cignetti has stacked up an absolutely insane resume in a very, very short amount of time. He's also looking to build to the future. He's slowly building up high school pipelines, but at a school like IU, it's going to take more time than what it would be at Ohio State, Notre Dame, Oregon, Georgia, Texas. So as prominent as Curt Cignetti has been on the field, I'm not expecting to see the number 3 recruiting class in the 2027 cycle to be Indiana's. But he's working his way up. And by the way that he's been hitting the transfer portal and the level of success that he's having in the transfer portal, it's not like he has to have the number 1 high school recruiting class year over year to have successful teams. He's going into a big year. He's not on my prove it list, but I brought this up earlier in the week. Now that he doesn't have that core foundation of the James Madison veterans on that team, and his portal classes are looking more like a Texas Tech portal class and LSU portal class, things like that, it's a different task, but I think that he's more than apt to handle it. One of the reasons why Curt Cignetti isn't number 1 on this list for me is because he's done it at the Power 4 level for 2 years. And I don't want to discredit anything that he's done because I have him at number 2. But then when you start comparing once you get out to 3 years, once you get out to 5 years, I can't compare Curt Cignetti in a 5-year span. Just can't. And what impressive things that he's done the last 2 years, I can't gauge that against 2 coaches in like Kirby Smart or Ryan Day, for example, that have been very successful at the Power 4 level for the last 5 to 8 years. That's kind of what separates it for me.
5 years ago, Curt Cignetti had a phenomenal team, Trev. A phenomenal team. A team that went 12-2, a team that made it to the Final Four at the end of the season. It was an FCS team. So how do you compare that to a year where Kirby Smart won a national championship?
Yeah, exactly.
Here's ultimately why I have Curt Cignetti ahead of Ryan Day. Number 1, they're 1-1 in head-to-head. They've won the last 2 national titles. Curt Cignetti, his team went undefeated. Had to beat Ohio State along the way. Had to beat Oregon twice along the way. Something that Ryan Day could not do the year before against an inferior Oregon team. I think this year's Oregon team was better than the year before's Oregon team, to be honest with you. Beat him twice. Ryan Day went 1-1. Now, again, both did a great job because both won in the games that matter in the postseason. But when you're splitting hairs, that's what you have to look at. Here's another advantage that Ryan Day or Curt Cignetti has on Ryan Day. Not only can he match Ryan Day's national championships and only needed 2 years to do it, where Ryan Day walked into Urban Meyer's Ohio State program and needed 5 years to win a title, Curt Cignetti went to Indiana and won a title in year 2 and was in the playoffs twice. It took him 2 years to win a title at Indiana, and he's done something that Ryan Day has never done, and he went undefeated. And if you say, okay, national titles 1-1, what is one thing that Curt Cignetti has done on top of having an undefeated team that Ryan Day has not done? He's also won a Big Ten championship, something Ryan Day has not done. So when you're comparing 2 coaches with elite resumes, that's something that you have to compare. The final piece for me to add on to what you already said about Curt Cignetti is he has done more with less, where I would say Ryan Day has done less with more. I think it's a disappointment that Ryan Day has only won 1 title in the last 5 years when you look at the rosters he's had. And that's a crazy thing to say because the guy won a title, and a lot of people would be jealous. But again, we're talking of the 3 best coaches, this is what separates them. I think Cignetti also gets a lot of credit for me for taking JMU from an FCS team to a D1 team and winning 20 games in 2 years. Or 19 games. They went 8-3 in his first year and then 11-1 in his second year. That's impressive to me, Trev. That is impressive to me. You can't take that away from him. And and then obviously in his second year, they beat an FBS team and Virginia, not a good one, goes to Indiana, people are nitpicking the 11-1 season apart. I get it. And I'm like, they beat the 2 teams that played for the title the year before. They blew out Nebraska. I mean, this is Indiana, guys. We're nitpicking that Indiana only won, X number of ranked opponents and only won, it's Indiana. But what's jumped it way up for me is this year, you can't question that anymore. You can't say, well, they beat they had a soft schedule. Was their schedule at Indiana hard this year in the regular season? No. But overall, no. But you know what it included? It included a win over Iowa on the road. It included a win at Oregon, who was a semifinal team, defending Big Ten champs. It was a ranked Illinois team by 53. It's not just beating Illinois. It's beating by 53. That matters. So, yeah, that's not a great regular season resume for anyone. It's Indiana. I get that, but it's not an elite resume. But when you go to the postseason and you beat Ohio State and the most talented team in the country in the Big Ten title game, when you then beat Alabama by 35 and you beat Oregon by 34 and then beat Miami, and let's be real, that was a freaking road game. That game was played at this place that Miami has all their home games. It was a road game for Indiana, and they won the game. The whole you didn't play anybody in the regular season means nothing to me now because I just watched him beat Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon, and Miami in 4 straight games. He belongs at number 2 on the list for that reason. Because, again, he's done things that Ryan Day has not in 2 years. So your point is correct, Trev. I can't compare a 5-year resume because it's impossible to compare what he did at JMU to what Ryan Day did at Ohio State. But I'll say this. The fact that he's done more in 2 years at Indiana than what Ryan Day's done at 5 at Ohio State means something to me. And that's why he's number 2 on my list.
That's fair.
Even though I don't love the guy, you know what I mean?
I get it.
But when you Google him, and that's what you see in his resume, is he accomplished more in 2 years than Ohio State's done in 5.
Very true.
Right?
Very
undefeated
true.
season. Right? What does that mean? Undefeated season, Big Ten championship. He can match Ryan Day's national title. They can match him. They're 1-1 against each other. What's the separator? He had an undefeated season. He beat Oregon on the road in the regular season, something Ohio State did not do the year they won the title. So he's had an undefeated season, and he's won a Big Ten title. 2 things Ryan Day has not done. So when you're separating great coaches, those are the separators for me between Curt Cignetti and Ryan Day.
Coming in at my number 1 spot, and I'm sure you guys have figured it out by now by process of elimination, my number 1 coach is Ryan Day. And this, again, I reiterate the fact that I said that 1, 2, and 3 is very, very close. And I think good points are being brought up all around. Brian, I agree with a lot of the things that you said about the differences between the 2. When you look at what Ryan Day did, for me, I think when all factors were on the table, it was hard for me not to put him number 1. In the same way that it was hard for me to not put Curt Cignetti at number 1. He went 37-6 the last 3 years, won the Natty in 24. I don't want to rehash a lot of the things that we've talked about. Obviously, they're a recruiting powerhouse. Maybe it was just because I wanted to get back in Archer's good graces because we've been beefing in the chat the last couple of weeks. Maybe that's why I put him at number 1. But in all seriousness, when I look at his resume overall as a whole, he's never had more than 2 losses in a season since taking over in 2018. He has the highest win percentage of any active coach in college football at .875. A lot of the resume boxes are there. I agree with a lot of what you're saying with the national championship things. The one counter that I have, because he made the playoffs in 19, 20, 24, 25, and then he played for the national championships in 2 of those years and then won it, obviously, in 2024. The biggest thing that I have with Ryan Day is sort of a defense, and I don't want to say it's a loose defense, but here's how I view this. What was the team that Indiana ran into that was a perennial, all-time team in the last 2 years? When I look back at because I'm with you, I think that when you just look at Ohio State's roster, you could say that Ryan Day has underperformed. I'm not disagreeing with that. But then I think about the 2019 roster. They lost to a team in Clemson that had quarterback Trevor Lawrence there who didn't lose until the following game against LSU. That was his first loss in college. And let's just play this out. If Ohio State loses, or if Ohio State beats Clemson, they're losing to 2019 LSU. Even with that great roster with Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson, that team is just on another level. So
I
like that.
actually think, Trev, they'd have been more competitive against LSU because their defense was better.
Oh, I do too. Absolutely. I think they would have been more competitive as well. I just don't think they would have beat them. And that's not a shot at Ohio State. I just don't think any team
Agree
was beating.
completely. I just
Yeah.
think they matched up better. They couldn't beat Clemson, but they matched up better against LSU.
Agreed.
I would agree with that.
Agreed. And then you look at 2020, where they played for the national championship. They got their get back against Clemson. They decimated them in the semifinals. And we could talk about, like the Big Ten that year played like 7 games versus like the other conferences who played like 10, 11, 12. But then they ran into another one of those teams that we consistently refer back to, and like they're not 2020 Bama, they're not 19 LSU. That's who Ohio State ran into in 2020. And then you look at 21, 22. I think his most underachieving season was 2022. A lot of Ohio State fans will put into, well, dude, like they didn't have Jackson Smith and Jig, but it's like, I understand that, but like you still had Marvin Harrison Jr., you still had Emeka Egbuka, you still had Travion Henderson. Like there are ways that you could have been productive as a team without just having him. Their defense wasn't.
Listen, Notre Dame beat Georgia with flipping Bo Collins as their best receiver. You can miss me with we couldn't do it because Marvin Harrison Jr. got knocked out of the game. You couldn't stop anybody on defense. That, you know what I mean? Like, who's that on, Trev?
Agreed. Completely.
Sorry. Get a little fired.
No, you're good, man. I mean, and then in 22, they make it back to the playoff semifinals. They eventually lose to the team that won the national championship. 2023, I don't think was one of those rosters that I say like he underperformed with it. I think they had good individual pieces, but I didn't think Kyle McCord was a championship caliber quarterback. And their running back room was a banged up Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams, and Chip Trainum. So it's like that roster. It's like
I think that was by far his worst roster, and they still went 11-2.
Agreed. So for a lot of those reasons, I put them up there. Now, you could also argue, I think that 25 was somewhat of an underperformance year once they got into those big moments. Yep. With guys like Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, the number 1 defense in the country. But again, if I'm talking about a head coach, that's like you underperformed with the talent you had on your roster, and that still includes an undefeated regular season, and that includes a trip to the conference championship game and still a playoff bid where you receive a bye. That does also carry some weight. So that's what ultimately separated Ryan Day. I think he ran into more of those perennial all-time teams than what Indiana did. They both won championships. Like, believe me, I'm not. Mm-hmm. If Notre Dame would have won the national championship in 2024, I don't think they also would have beaten the team on the way there. That was one of those perennial teams like what Ohio State had to face in 19 and 20. So that was a factor that I played in here as well.
I get that. My issue is the year that they lost to that great Georgia team, they also got blown out by Michigan.
Sure.
The year that 2021, underachieve, you get beat at home by Oregon, and then you get blown out at Michigan, and barely beat a Utah team that had one of their running backs playing corner in that game. You know what I mean? Like 23, that was their worst roster. It still was a roster that was better than what their team was, in my opinion. 24, you win the title, but like that was an ugly, not enjoyable regular season for Ohio State fans. Like, and none of them, if any of them tell you now, no, we were good. They're lying. There were Ohio State fans calling for him to be fired prior to the national title win. And then this past season, like their record, their schedule in the regular season wasn't that much different, let's be honest, than what Indiana played the year before. Let's be real about that. They played a really good Texas team, and outside of that, they played nobody. Their next best opponent was Michigan, who had fired their head coach already. Then they played 3 good teams, and they lost to 2 of them, and the other one they beat by 7 in a 14-7 game. Like, again, when you're doing separate, here's my number 1 is Kirby Smart, and I've got some very interesting things to say about Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart's number 1 for one reason only: his resume is still better than the other 2 coaches. If I had to pick a head coach to run my team and I could only pick one of these 3, I'm picking Curt Cignetti. And I'll maybe pick Kirby second and then Ryan Day third. But here's the reality of it. To your point, Trevor, Cignetti's got a great 2-year resume. But it's not just about the last 2 years for me. This isn't a what have you done for me lately ranking. It's part of it. But if you go through my criteria, 3 years and 5 years, in the last 3 years, Kirby Smart's won 2 SEC titles, and the only other year they didn't win the SEC title, they played in the SEC title game and went 13-1. In the last 5 years, they've had 2 national titles to Indiana and Ohio State's 1 each. In the last 5 years, they also had a generational, in my opinion, championship team. Something Ohio State and Indiana did not do, in my opinion. You also look at the last 5 years. This is a team that I believe has won, 3 conference championships in the last 5 years? Correct? They won it in 25. They won it in 24. They won it in – actually, no, they've won 4. No, 3, because they lost – I keep forgetting that they lost to Bama in the SEC title in 2021. Yeah. But the team that beat them for the SEC title in 21, they beat for the national title in a rematch. So the resume for Kirby Smart is still better than anybody else over the last 5 years. This is what Kirby Smart's done over the last 5 years. 14-1, 15-0, 13-1, 11-3, 12-2. They've gone 5-2 in the postseason in the last 5 years. Ohio State, I think, is 3-3 in the postseason the last 5 years, I believe. Let me go look that up. Obviously, Cignetti's 3-1. And by postseason, I'm just referring to bowl games. Ohio State in the last 5 years has gone actually 4-3. 5-3 in the last 3 years. Kirby's gone 5-2. And won the only matchup against Ryan Day in that stretch. So that's why I rank Kirby Smart number 1. Cignetti, arrow's trending up. Ryan Day, the arrow's it's flat because I don't know how much better you can be. You know what I mean? Like he's not trending up because they're already up. He's already there. I think that's where he is for me. But here's my thing between the 3 of them. I have Kirby number 1 because I have always said, Trev, when we have these, it's the 5-year period that has the biggest sway for me. And Kirby's just been better than those other 2 coaches. Even with a year of, the year that Kirby won his first national title, Curt Cignetti lost in the semifinals of the FCS playoffs. You know what I mean? Kirby won a national championship. Their worst, year as far as like not getting a chance to play for a championship is the year they went 13-1. So here's the difference between the other 3. If Kirby Smart doesn't make a run this year, and I'm talking about not winning the title, but if they don't win at least 1 playoff game, maybe 2, he's going down on this list. Because here's what this season is going to prove to me. Is Kirby Smart's resume better than the other coaches because of him, or is it because of Todd Monken? Because here's the reality of Kirby Smart outside of Todd Monken. This is what Kirby Smart has done in those years. 8-5, 13-2, 11-3, 12-2, 8-2 in year 1 of Todd Monken during COVID, 13-1 against a weak schedule, didn't play for the title, 11-3 and 12-2. Now, those are great years, Trev. But those aren't as good as what Ryan Day has done. If you take his tenure outside of Kirby Smart, outside of the Todd Monken years, Ryan Day has a better resume. There's no question Ryan Day has a better resume. The 3 years under Todd Monken, 8-2 in year 1, as he's turning things around, and then the next 2 years, 29-1. Their only loss being in the SEC title game to a team they beat a month later in the national title. Their second national championship win, they won 65-7. Or was it 63-7? I always forget because I kind of stopped paying attention at the end of the
game. It was a number in the 60s. I think that's all we got to know.
Yes, it was 65-7. I undersold it. Excuse me. So I look at it and say, I don't think it's actually, as I've kind of thought through the criteria, and I don't know where I had Kirby last year. But as I think through the criteria, it's hard for me to accept an argument for anyone other than Kirby to be number 1 when you're just looking at the resume of the last 5 years, which carries more weight to me than what happened in 19 or 20 with Ryan Day. Because I would argue that Ryan Day was gifted he was kind of like Lincoln Riley. He was gifted something pretty amazing, and now it's like, don't F it up. where Georgia had basically fired a coach when he stepped in, and he had to kind of take it to another level. But that's where I'm at, Trev, because when I look at this Georgia team, if you were to ask me about Kirby, I'd say the arrow's pointing down. Yeah. Now, if you look at it over the last 3 years only, Kirby's not in the top three. And I would argue, Trev, if you only look at the last 3 years, you could make a case that Marcus Freeman should be ahead of him as well. You could make a case that Dan Lanning should be ahead of him in the last 3 years. How many postseason, how many playoff games has Kirby Smart won since Todd Monken left in the last 3 years? None. Dan Lanning's won playoff games. Marcus Freeman's won 3 playoff games, including a 13-point win in New Orleans over Kirby. And Kirby's stealing plays from their special teams this past year in games, and now you've got SEC schools that want to change the rules because of all the stuff that Notre Dame's doing against them. They're all crying. Kirby's crying about what they did. Arkansas is crying about what they did against them for fakes and stuff like that. That's where this new rule's coming from. It's because Notre Dame's a big driver. They're using, I was told they use Notre Dame clips to make their point of why the rule's going to need to change. So if you look at just the last 3 years, Trev, I don't think you can justify having Kirby Smart number 3. He's not recruiting as well as those other 2 coaches either right now with the portal and high school recruiting, and he's not developing as well as Cignetti. You know, I mean, heck, Kurt Cignetti can win playoff games, something that Kirby Smart can't. We say, oh, it's a different team. Okay, well, the team that knocked Georgia out of the playoffs got beat the next week by Miami, who then went and got beat by Indiana. So I can do a little bit of transitive property here. You know, the final score of the Indiana-Notre Dame game was closer than the final score of the Georgia-Notre Dame game. I mean, you could play all these games, but the reality is who got more out of their football team from a development standpoint the last 2 years? Kurt Cignetti or Kirby Smart? It's freaking Kurt Cignetti by 1,000 miles. But it's when you add the 5-year window, it's just not close for now. But here's the thing, Trev. When we do this ranking a year ago, the 21 season is no longer in my 5-year window. So if he doesn't do something this year to prove that he can win at an elite level without Todd Monken, then I'm going to have to chalk this up to the Todd Monken years were the anomalies. Now, Georgia's still very good. He'll be in the top 5. But he won't be in the top 3 if they can't do something this year. Because now, Trev, you're 23, 24, 25, 26. You're now 4 years removed from Todd Monken being gone. You can't figure it out by then? You know? So this is a big year for Kirby Smart when I'm going through these rankings, Trev. So he's number 1 for me now, which is going to sound crazy of all the things I just said. But when I look at the resume of the last 5 years and your down year in the last 5 years is a year in which you won the SEC championship and won 11 games and made it, we're in the quarterfinals of the college football playoffs. That's your down year, is 11-3 and made the playoffs, won the SEC title, beat Texas twice. I got to put you number 1. You know, so that's where I'm at, Trev. That's where I'm at. But I have a feeling that in a year from now, when we're doing this ranking again, Kirby Smart not only won't be number 1, he won't be in the top 3. That's my prediction.
You know, depending on how this season shakes out, there's a world, depending on who plays and who wins the national championship in 2026, there's a world that he might not be in the top 5. A world, based on a lot of the things that you talked about. Like if Marcus Freeman and Dan Lanning play for the national championship, coach in the national championship game against each other in 26, where does Kirby Smart start fitting his name into that conversation between him, Lanning, Freeman, Day, Cignetti? It's interesting. I'm with you. It'll be an ongoing evaluation, that's for sure. It's very interesting to see, but this is a very, very fun ranking to do.
Yes, and challenging, to be honest with you. Yeah, it's very challenging.
Brian, to take us home on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We're sticking with the college football topic, and we're sticking with the coaches conversation, but we're going to work our way through some superlatives. And this one's going to be a little bit more rapid fire than what the top 10 ranking is. But to give you guys a window in, we just got done ranking our top 10 coaches in college football. Now we're going to be broadening the scope a little bit and giving out some superlatives. And we're breaking down most underrated coaches, most overrated coaches. We're talking about coaches going into prove it years, some up and comers, and then coaches on the hot seat. This one will be a little bit more quick hitting than what the top 10 was, but these are some topics where it gives us an opportunity to talk about more coaches than just the 10 that we just got done talking about. So this is going to be another interesting one. And at the start of all this, Brian, you and I were talking. I had a little bit more fun putting this one together than I did just the overall top 10.
Yeah. And one thing we tried to do, and again, we're going to rapid fire. We're going to give our 5 and then just a couple quick notes about our 5 of each of these. But we try to keep it to 5. The list could be a lot longer. I'm actually going to list some quick names at the end on the hot seat one. Trev will as well, beyond the top 5. But we tried our best to not have coaches in multiple areas, but sometimes it just fits. But this was fun, and it was most underrated, most overrated, prove it years, up and comers, hot seat. Let's start with the most underrated, Trev. These are the coaches that we believe don't get the respect nationally for how good they are. Maybe they're never going to be in the top 10 coaches rankings, but guys that you look at what they've done, at where they are, deserve a lot more credit than maybe they're getting in places. So let me hear your first 5. I kind of grouped them by conference more so than ranking 1 to 5. So that's how I did it. You can rank them. You can provide them however you want, Trev. But that's just kind of I didn't actually rank 1 to 5 in each group.
Same.
I kind of went by conference to a degree. But let's go. Let's first start with your 5 most underrated coaches in college football. Guys that we don't think are getting enough credit for how good of a job they're doing at their schools. And a lot of times it's beyond their record.
Agreed. So my 5, I have Kalani Sitake at BYU. I have Brian Newberry at Navy, Rhett Lashley at SMU, Alex Golesh, and I kind of put in there like South Florida / Auburn because he's a new coach there now. And then I also have Willie Fritz at Houston. Those are my 5 coaches that I have in my most underrated category. A lot of arguments to be made as to why, that's for sure. Very, very fun ones.
Just go through all 5 of them rapid fire, and it'll just be easier that way since we are going a little bit more rapid fire to just give us your 5, make a couple notes, and then I'll give mine.
Yeah, I mean, for Kalani Sitake, it's pretty simple. I mean, he made BYU a college football playoff contender. There are a lot of people out there that thought, in the same light that Notre Dame had an argument to be in the college football playoff, so did BYU. They've gone 23-4 the last 2 years under him. There's a lot of attention going to Big 12 coaches. A lot of people talk about Kenny Dillingham, rightfully so. I mean, I even talked about Willie Fritz from the Big 12. I get it. But Kalani Sitake's up there with the best coaches in the Big 12. He just doesn't get talked about enough. With Brian Newberry, it's simple. He gets overlooked because he's at a service school. You can make the same argument for Army's head coach, but I would argue that Brian Newberry's success has been more sustained, and it's trending a little bit more up than what is Army's head coach. But I mean, look, he's 21-5 the last 2 seasons, and 2 of their 5 losses have been to 2 very good Notre Dame football teams. He's made Navy a G5 playoff contender. I really like what he has going on, so he's on this list for me. Same thing with Rhett Lashley. I think he gets overlooked because he's in the ACC and he's at a school with SMU, and up until recently, when people hear SMU, they think death penalty. They don't think playoff contender for the league championship, but since he's taken over, he's 38-16. He's 20-7 the last 3 years, which is basically what Kalen DeBoer has done the last 3 years, or really the last 2 years at Alabama, with not even half of the recognition. Different conversation for later on in the show. But he made the college football playoffs in 2024 and the ACC Conference Championship in his 3rd year. So Rhett Lashley's on this list for me. And then Alex Golesh. I mean, 3 winning seasons in a row to a school like South Florida. From 2023 to 2025, he's gone 7-6, 7-6, 9-4. Before his arrival, Brian, South Florida went a combined 8-37 from 2019 to 2022. Alex Golesh steps in, immediately makes them in contention for a bowl team. He absolutely belongs on this list for me. And then Willie Fritz at Houston. A lot of talk about Big 12 coaches, but Willie Fritz doesn't get mentioned a ton. Turned them around, and going into year 2, first year he takes over, they go 4-8, they go 10-3, and then obviously you guys know I'm very high on Houston. They have a very high outlook this season, and I like them. They're one of the favorites, not at the top of the list in the Big 12, but they're in the top 5 on FanDuel to win the conference. So Willie Fritz is in that conversation for me as well.
I love the Newberry pick, Trev. I have him just outside my list. He was my next guy mentioned. I had him just outside, just because I just want to see a little bit more of a track record. Now, there's a coach I have on my list who doesn't have a very long track record, but he did it in the SEC, and I'll get to him. But I started in the Big 12 because I think this is, in my opinion, you could argue the two most underrated coaches in the country, I think, are in the Big 12. And the first one is Willie Fritz, Trev. I think when you look at the job that Willie Fritz has done at multiple stops, I mean, Tulane was not – they would have the occasional good season. I mean, I can remember back when Tommy Bowden was the head coach there, and they had a great year with Sean King at quarterback. You know, they've had some seasons here and there. But with Willie Fritz, I mean, he took them from kind of a mediocre program for a while, got them to 3 bowl games in a row, which for Tulane was pretty good. Had a down 2021 year. They went 2-10. And then the next 2 years, they bounced back and went 23-4, including a win over USC in the Cotton Bowl. Think about that. Goes to a Houston program that's an absolute mess, replaces Dana Holgerson, who had really struggled, and just that roster was a mess. They go 4-8 in year one. And he comes out in this next year, and they go and they win 10 games. And honestly, Trev, they played Texas Tech for most of that game pretty tough. They were a team that didn't look great early, just got better and better as the year went on. You know, nice win over a 9-win Arizona team, a road win over Arizona State. Had a bad loss to West Virginia, lost by 3 TCU, beat Baylor, and then beat LSU in a bowl game. Like, there's not big time talent there. We just watched Connor Wegman just kind of struggle mightily at Texas A&M the year before. Goes to Houston and completely gets a season as his career revitalized. Looks like a completely different quarterback. And it didn't happen right away. He kind of looked like that same Connor Wegman early in the season. I think he's done a heck of a job. Think about this. In the last 4 years, he has had 3 10-plus win games at Tulane and Houston. That's pretty good. Also have Kalani Sitake on my list, Trev. I think it says a lot about how he's viewed that last year Big 12 coaches named him the coach of the year and not Joey McGuire. You know, does more with less, doesn't have the talent. In the last 6 years, they've had 4 10-plus win seasons and 3 11-plus win seasons. They finished ranked in 4 of the last 6 years. Last 2 seasons, Trev, they've gone 23-4 in their first 2 of their first 3 years as a Power 5 team. They've only been a Power 5 team for 3 years, and they went 5-7 in year one, which is honestly what kept them out of being in the top 10. Was that 5-7 season, and then the fact that some of the other stuff was G5 seasons. Last 2 years, though, 23-4. If BYU has another comparable season like they did last year, Kalani Sitake's in my top 10 next season. Like no doubt about it, he'll be in my top 10 next season. He does not get enough love for just a really good coach he is. Another guy that doesn't have a great record that I think is a heck of a coach is Lance Leopold at Kansas. They've gone 5-7 the last 2 years, and I'd argue that's actually a really good coaching job the last couple of years. You know what I mean? This is a big year for him to continue showing that they can kind of trend back up, and I think that they will. But, you know, I think he's a really good football coach that's turned in Kansas. Like, even when they're have a 5-7 record, they're a tough out. And I think he's a very underrated coach. And then Rhett Lashley's another guy that I don't think gets enough credit for the job he's done. We're always looking for reasons to kind of pick apart the success that SMU has had. But the reality is he's had 4 straight winning seasons at SMU. 2 of his last 3 years have gone 11-3. His 9-4 record last year in the ACC was a disappointment. What does it say about the job you've done at SMU when a 9-4 season in which you beat a team that played for the national championship is a disappointing season? I think that says a lot. You know, in 2 years in the ACC, they've gone 20-7. I think he's done a really nice job there. And they've won at least 11 games in 2 of their last 3 seasons. Really like the job that they're doing. And they're recruiting very well right now. Very well. He's using the resources they have quite well. And then my last one is Clark Lee. I think Clark Lee, the job he did the last 2 years at Vanderbilt was impressive. It's enough to get him consideration for being in the top 10, but I just can't give it to him yet because I need to see if he can win outside of Diego Pavia. And they don't have a lot of great wins the last 2 years. They've beat up on all the teams they're supposed to beat up on outside of the Bama win 2 years ago. But again, it's Vanderbilt. You know what I mean? Like, it's Vanderbilt. The fact that we're like criticizing, you don't have enough ranked wins for me to be impressed. It's Vanderbilt. You know what I mean? I think Clark Lee's done a great job at Vanderbilt. I just need to see what can you do in the post-Diego Pavia world. Well, he's going to have to figure out a way to win with maybe the number one quarterback in the country last year in Jared Curtis. Woe is life for Clark Lee. I think they'll take a step back this year. So it's not this year that they didn't win 10 games again. He sucks. Just go to a bowl game again, be above 500, and then be prepared. Then now in year 2 of Jared Curtis, year 3 of Jared Curtis, you're back to being a 9+ win team. I think he's done a good job. And as I said, Brian Newberry was my guy that I just had a really hard time keeping off my list. But you're correct. He's done a really nice job the last 2 years in Navy. But with him, I'm kind of like I am with Clark Lee. Let me see what you do in the post-Blake Horvath universe. Then you'll be on my list next year.
It's funny how that divvied itself up. That's how I felt about Clark Lee. It's like, I mean, honestly, one of the things that's going against Clark Lee is completely out of his control. It's the ascension of Indiana. Yep. Because in the same conversation, like, but he did that at Vanderbilt. It's like a lot of people be like, yeah, but like, look what Sig did at IU. That's not fair to Clark Lee, but I'm with you. He was right there for me in that discussion too. Up next, Brian, is the category of overrated coaches. And I don't know how you did this. Here's how I viewed and put overrated. I put overrated as not to the connotation of the word. People hear overrated and they assume people mean suck. They'll be like, yeah, that guy's overrated. It's like, oh, so he sucks. No, I don't think any of these coaches, well, 4 of my 5 coaches I don't think suck. I don't. But it's overrated per the stigma that they bring to the table, in my opinion. And so some of them are names that I've already talked about in my top 10, which is funny because I'm talking about overrated and then I'm the one that created the rankings. But this is how I formulated my overrated coaches. The first one I have on this list is Dan Lanning, and I think he's overrated per national narratives. I've seen rankings where people put him above Marcus Freeman and Kirby Smart, and I did not have him above my rankings above Marcus Freeman and Kirby Smart. I think Dan Lanning is a top 5 coach in the country, but there's some people that are willing to put him at 3rd or at 2nd because of the 1-point win they had at home over Ohio State, which was a good win. But it kind of gets washed when you lose by how you did in the Rose Bowl to that same team. So Dan Lanning's on this list for me. I think he's done a heck of a job at Oregon, but I don't think that he's in the same tier like what other people put him in, along with Ryan Day, who's won a national championship, Kirby Smart, who's won 2, Kurt Signetti, who's won 1. I just don't have him on that plane yet, and there's other people willing to. So in that light, I think that Dan Lanning is overrated, but still a heck of a coach. Next up on this list for me is Kalen DeBoer. When I go back and look at what he's done, again, I ranked him at 7th, had a very hard time doing so. The biggest thing for me is the amount of bad losses that get swept under the rug with Kalen DeBoer. That bothers me. People are willing to talk about going into Athens and beating Georgia and ending the streak, which he did. I'm not taking that away. But people aren't willing to talk about the 2024 loss to Vanderbilt, or the Oklahoma loss by 21 points to a 7-6 Oklahoma team. They're not willing to talk about the Florida State loss, which the committee even blew by because they were too busy watching the Notre Dame Miami game. Nobody's willing to talk about that outside of this channel. You go and you look at how they lost in the conference championship game. I didn't think they were going to win that one back when we did our prediction show. I didn't think that Alabama was going to win that game. I did not predict them to lose by 21 points. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. And then you go and you see how they lost by Indiana. Yes, they went on to win the national championship. I mean, Texas lost to Ohio State in 2024, a team that went on to win the national championship. They didn't lose by 35 in a game that was over by halftime. And yet people are still, it's crazy, man. So in
3
that
of their
light,
4 losses were by double freaking digits last year, Trev.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. It's not even the losses. It's how they've lost in some of those games, which is really, really bad. My next coach on this list, and I know people are going to not like this one, and that's okay. But here's my argument for it. I have Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. I think he's an overrated head coach, and I know people aren't going to like it. He's been the head coach at Iowa since 1999, which deserves a lot of respect. It does. But recently, I think he's been overrated the same way that I think Iowa has been overrated. Every single year, Iowa's that team of, hey, look out for this team. They could be sneaky Big Ten contenders and all this other stuff. Since 2010, they went 12-2 in 2015, heck of a season. Outside of that 1 year since 2010, they have an average record of 8-4. Technically, the numbers work out to like 8.47. But Iowa's the same team every single year.
Did you take out 2020 in that conversation?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good. Because that's going to skew both of those numbers a little bit because they went 6-2. Yeah.
But it's an average of 8-4, 8-4 or 8-5 every single year. And so one of those things of like, you can play both sides of the coin of like, he's Mr. Consistent, which like, sure. But I'm sure Iowa fans every year don't set out to be, can't wait to be 8-4 again.
Which
maybe
they should.
We'll go 10-2.
I mean, they should, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that. I mean, because Iowa doesn't have that in their history.
In the new state of college football, though, I disagree. Like, because you can't say at a program like Iowa when Vandy just had a 9-win season.
They're not going to spend the way that other programs are. They're just not for football.
Is
Indiana doing what they're doing without like guys like Mark Cuban?
Fair.
And could anybody other than Sig have done what they did in Indiana?
No, probably not. But my point is the reason why he's on the overrated list for me is because every year, despite not having the funding and Iowa's just not that team, but then every year but Iowa could be that team. It's like, but based on what then?
Yeah.
If they don't have the funding and they're not a school that cares about football, then why do we keep talking about them like they're a school that cares about football and has the funding? That's why I put him in my overrated list. A lot of respect for what he's done. He's been the head coach at Iowa since I was 2.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a level of respect there, but I just that's how I factor him in that conversation. And then last one, and the most obvious one, is Lincoln Riley at USC. Yeah. I mean, good Lord. I mean, he's still living off of the Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray hype train at Oklahoma. He is, but not enough people have evaluated what he's done at USC. He underperformed in 2022 with a Heisman winner. He fell apart in 2023, despite starting the season 7-0
with the number 1 draft pick on his team.
With the number 1 Heisman returning quarterback on his team.
Who ended up being exactly.
Yeah, it was decent in 2025, but decent for like USC standards. Like we're giving him flowers because he got 9 wins at a school like USC. He has a 90-28 overall record as a head coach. 18 of those losses have been at USC in 4 years. He was at Oklahoma for 5. That's how it is for me. So I am all on with the Lincoln Riley's an overrated head coach train.
I'm with you on that one. I don't think Kirk Ferentz is overrated because I think winning 8-9 games every single year at a place like Iowa, the last 3 years they've had years where they've won 8, 9, and 10 the last 3 years, I think is pretty impressive. I will say this. My frustration with his unwillingness to modernize his offense to the point where they can get competent quarterback play does drive me nuts and holds them back. I do think that. And that's where my initial reaction was like, I'm going to really push back on Trev on this one. And I was like, no, I'm not, because I can't say if you just would do this with your offense and find a competent quarterback, you could win more than 8, 9, or 10 games and then say he's maximizing his program every year. You know what I mean? Like, that's a contradictory thing to say, Trev, is to say that. So I don't have in my overrated list, but your argument is such, and my frustration with the offense and the quarterback is such that it's like, I don't have a great leg to stand on to tell you why you're wrong. You know what I mean? Because but Brian, you've told me if they could get a good quarterback play that they could do this. You're telling me somebody in the chat said they can't find a Trinidad Chambliss? They did. Mark Gronowski. And then they suffocated him. So I get it. I can't do it, but I get it. I really do get it. Here's my overrated coaches, Trev. People are going to laugh at some of these. I have 2 in the Big Ten. Jed Fish is one for me. Now, he's got something to prove this year. He's a guy that he could prove me wrong this season, but people talk about Jed Fish like he's this great coach, and I'm like, he's been okay. They're really good at home. They had that one surprise year at Arizona, but that surprise year at Arizona, like, they had a pretty talented football team. And then you go to Washington, you have a down year because you're rebuilding the roster, and then they win 9 games in year 2. But I'm like, that was such a disappointing, uninspiring 9-win season for me. Like, some of the losses you had, you're like, dude, how do you lose that game? Like, honestly, how do you go out there and lose that game? And I'm just not a huge Jed Fish fan, to be honest with you, Trev. My other overrated Big Ten coaches, and they're both from the Pac-12, is Lincoln Riley. I mean, he's a 500 coach the last 3 years at USC. I mean, let's be real. Has he done anything the last 4 years at USC that is any different at all than what Clay Helton did in his first 4 years at USC? I mean, think about it. Clay Helton's first 4 years at USC, his first year they went 8-6. His second year they went 10-3. His third year they went 11-3. 2 top 10 finishes in the coaches poll, and then in year 4 went 5-7. Lincoln Riley in his 4 years had an 11-3 year, 8-5, 7-6, 9-4. Two top 20 finishes, 0 top 10 finishes. How's he any better than Clay Helton? At all. He's not so far. So he's another coach that has a big proven year. He's not in my proven category because I didn't want to add them any, but this is a big year for him. And you went out and hired Chad Bowden, and Chad Bowden's doing exactly at USC what he did at Notre Dame, recruiting his tail off. So you can't use talent as an excuse anymore this year. You're in year 5, bruh. You got rid of Notre Dame off your schedule because you're a coward. If you can't win 10-plus games this year, you're officially in the you owe Bob Stoops a lot of the money that you've made the last 7-8 years. Like, if Bob Stoops isn't forever on your Christmas list, you know, where you're buying, like, which grandchild do you want me to buy a brand new car for this year, Bob? You know what I mean? Then you're not a good person at this point. So I'm not a big fan of Lincoln Riley at all and his track record. People act he's offensive genius. Is he, though? You know, maybe when he was in the Big 12 and he had the best roster in the league by a mile. Hasn't looked like an offensive genius the last 2 years. Last 3 years. You know, you went 7-6 with Caleb Williams, who's, from what I can tell, having a pretty good NFL career so far. I mean, he's been good. I don't know if he's been elite, but definitely good. So he's on my list. I got an SEC coach on my list, Eli Drinkwitz. I think Eli Drinkwitz is a good football coach. He's a good, solid football coach. I don't want to act like he's some terrible coach because, like you said, overrated doesn't mean you suck. I just think he gets a lot more credit than maybe he should. And the 2-year stretch of 11-2 and 10-3 was impressive. You got a bowl win. He's done something that Marcus Freeman hasn't done. Beat Ryan Day in a bowl game. You know what I mean? But I just think their teams have underachieved the last 2 years. His 10-3 2 years ago was, to me, below what your talent was. Like, Missouri has had really good talent in the last couple of years. And when I look at this program, you know, look, you can say whatever it's Missouri. Gary Pinkel was a far more successful coach at Missouri, in my opinion, than what he's done. And let's not kid ourselves. In his first 3 years at Missouri, Gary Pinkel, they went 5-7 in year 1. They went 12-2 and 11-3 the next 2 years and won the SEC East. So this isn't like, oh my God, he's doing things in Missouri no one's ever done before. No, he's not. So I think he's a bit of an overrated coach. Solid coach, but not what they make him out to be. And Missouri had no business being ranked for most of last season. And it's because of that. Another overrated coach to me, Trev, Kalen DeBoer. And this hurts my heart to say Kalen DeBoer because I've been a big Kalen DeBoer fan. But what I've realized about Kalen DeBoer is he's a really good coach in the small, little, perfect universe that he can thrive in, where it doesn't matter that you have no desire to run the football at all. You can win in Fresno. You can win in the Pac-12 with that style of play, but you can't adapt and evolve at all. At all. And that's been the most disappointing thing we've seen at Alabama the last 2 years is this is a really smart offensive coach, but he's a lot like Rich Rodriguez. He can only thrive when the ingredients are perfect. Like, he's that guy, Trev, that at his home can make you a really nice meal, and he does it every night. Or he's got that restaurant where it's like, this is who we are. We stay in this lane. We serve the same thing. But then he gets nominated to go be on Chopped, and he's terrible because he can't think outside the box and take these ingredients. I don't know what to do with these ingredients. He's like that guy that doesn't finish the meal or leaves out 3 ingredients, you know, or goes to the back and gets all the things he knows and makes it. And they're like, dude, you left out the box. You're out. This is a good meal, but nothing from the box is in here, you know, because we're both cooking guys. Trev and I spent about 30 minutes on the phone today talking about steaks and cooking and stuff. But like, is that not the perfect analogy for Kalen DeBoer?
Perfect.
And so you're not a great coach when you can't coach outside of this little small framework. You can't go to a place like Bama and in any way, shape, form, or fashion develop a competent run game. You know, like, that's a tough one for me, Trev. So he's overrated. A good football coach.
Yep.
Very good football coach. What he did at Washington was great, but I can't put him in the top 10 anymore because of that. And then my last one, people are going to love this one, Trev. My last one. I'm going to take a swig of coffee to let people think about this one. Who do you think I'm going to go with, folks? Joey McGuire, Texas Tech. Let's be real about something. Do you know who gets the credit for me for last year's success? It's not Baron Morton. It's not David Bailey. It's not Joey McGuire. It's James Blanchard, who built that roster for him and said, don't F it up. And he didn't. And he made good coordinator hires last year. I'll give him that. But people act like he's some great coach, and he runs his yap like he's done something. Bruh, the flag football team me and Trevor never started scored as many points as you did in the playoffs last year. Kent State scored as many points in the playoffs as you did last year. And you want to keep running your mouth about Notre Dame? That's like the perfect meme I could come up with was the Conor McGregor. Who the is that guy? You know, like, bro, stay in your little lane. Okay? Thank James Blanchard for the rest of your life for making you somewhat relevant. Because that's the only reason anybody knows who you are. He's a solid football coach. Because the point I made a week or two ago was they were winning and getting to bowl games before James Blanchard came on and did what he did. And Cody Campbell bought the roster, which I'm not faulting either of those guys. That's the rules. Good on you guys for going by the rule. Oh, they're just throwing bags at big-time recruits. Yeah, and is there a rule they're breaking? If there's a rule they're breaking, then we can talk about it. But you could say maybe it's unwise, but that's what you got to do. So is he a bad coach? No. Again, bowl game every year of his career. Good on you. But you're an 8-5 coach that James Blanchard and Cody Campbell turned into someone that people think is better than an 8-5 coach. And that's who you are. So in the future, coach, leave Notre Dame out your mouth until you score a point in the postseason. Please. So he's on my overrated list. He's also on my SHIT list, Trev.
Oh, that's good. I get it. I get it completely. I'll rattle off my prove-it-year coaches pretty quickly because some of them are repeat guys. What's funny about this first name on this list is Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer had a spot in every single category we talked about today for me. Legitimately. I mean, outside of underrated, if I'm being real. Outside of underrated head coaches, he had a spot everywhere for me in somewhere in my top 10. As an overrated coach, as a coach going into the prove-it year, as a coach that's potentially on the hot seat. I guess he's not an up-and-comer either. But Kalen DeBoer has been a repeat offender, I guess you could call him on this list, but he is going into a prove-it year. Yes, they made the playoffs. Undeservingly so. Can you change that narrative this year? Because that is the opportunity in front of Alabama if we're being honest and objective about what is the opportunity in front of Kalen DeBoer. There's a lot of people, myself included, and I'd be happy to lead that charge. I know that I'm not because the esteemed gentleman to this side of me is the person, one of the people leading that charge, in that Alabama should not have been in the college football playoffs in 2025. But the opportunity in front of them is to, in a similar light to Notre Dame, leave no doubt this season and prove to people that they have and deserve to be in the college football playoffs. That's why I think this is a prove-it year for DeBoer. Not much more to dive into there. It's another reason why I have Dabo Swinney on this list for me as well. There's been a lot of ups and downs for him the last couple of years, and there's people that are claiming that he's still everything that he was. There's people that are claiming that he is nothing like he once was, and then there's people in the middle like Brian and I that are like, there's still some of it there, but he has to go out and prove it this year, which is why he's on this list for me. My next coach on this list, honestly, is Marcus Freeman. I love Marcus Freeman, and I would want no other coach to be leading Notre Dame. I wouldn't. I don't think that there's a better fit. We talk all the time about fit. But let's be real about something here. If we're being honestly objective about this, what is one thing that he doesn't have in common with Ryan Day, Kurt Cignetti, Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning, and Steve Sarkisian. Multiple playoff appearances. And we can get into the conversation of they shoulda, coulda, woulda, all this in 2025, but they weren't. That's the reality of the situation. They rattled off 10 straight, won all of it by double digits. But now this is a prove-it year for Marcus Freeman because now he does have the best roster that he constructed. Mm-hmm. He has done all of the work to get them into this position. Now it's time to go prove that you are one of the top 4 teams in the country. That's why he's on this list.
So what I'm hearing you is Marcus Freeman is a really good football coach. Yes. But this is the prove-it year to show that he's an elite football coach. Is that
absolutely?
Am I reading you? Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
Again, guys, we're no longer talking about overrated. I just want to clear it up in the chat. We've moved on to coaches that have something to prove this year. This is a prove-it year, which can mean a lot of different things. We are no longer in the overrated category. I think some people missed the transition out of overrated into another category. We are not talking overrated. We're talking coaches who have something to prove this year, and they're all proving something on different levels. For example, Trevor talking about Marcus Freeman. He's a excellent coach, but we just said he has no business being in the conversation with the top 3. What Trevor's arguing is this is what he has to prove to be in there with those top 3. So just so we're clear, and it can be different things. So I just want to make sure we're clear because some people are like, what? Overrated? So it's not what we're saying. Just so we're clear.
Yes, believe me, this is not my audition to become a heel in the WWE. Marcus Freeman.
We were talking before the show and said, Trev, we need you to say something really dumb today so I can come in and save the day and yell at you for 10 minutes. And then I'm the face and you're the heel. Okay. I'm the baby face and you're the heel. That's what we're going to do today. No, we're moved on to a different category. And I think we can all, if we're being objective, agree that this is a year that Marcus Freeman has to prove that he's an elite coach, not just a really good coach and an elite recruiter.
Yes. I appreciate the clarification.
Because I'm watching the chat while you're talking, and I'm like, I don't think some of these people have recognized that we're no longer in the overrated category.
No, we're talking about coaches on the hot seat. So I'll continue my conversation with Marcus Freeman. And no, it's
I would have to accidentally. Hey guys, listen, Trevor's got the flu. He's on some really heavy medication, so he's a little off his game today. I apologize in advance. No,
but yes, he has the opportunity to go from really, really good coach to an elite coach and crack inside of that top 3 that we were talking about. That's what he has to prove this year because we believe that he can do it.
Yep.
And that is why it's a prove it season for him. The next 2 are pretty obvious. Lincoln Riley, for all the reasons that we just talked about. Can you be a person that can lead a program like USC? I'm in the impression that he can't, but that's why it's a prove it year because he has the opportunity to prove me wrong, like Mario Cristobal had the opportunity to prove me wrong in 2025. That is not me saying Lincoln Riley's getting ready to play for the national title, but I just don't think he has the chops to be the head coach at a place like USC. And then, it's what it's starting to feel like, man. It's what it's starting to feel like. Oh my goodness. No, and then the final coach on this list for me is Brett Venables at Oklahoma. Quite simply, who are you? I mean, he's been in Oklahoma for 4 years, and they've gone back and forth between 10-3 and 7-6. They went 7-6 and then 10-3, and then 7-6 and then 10-3 this past year. Do you break that cycle, or do you go back to what you were? I'm under the belief that they break that cycle. I like Oklahoma this year, but that's why he's in the prove it category. So those are those for me.
They actually went 6-7 and 10-3, and then 6-7 and 10.
That's right.
It's even worse. Prove it category. Brent Venables is at the top of my list, Trev, for the exact reasons you mentioned. I think he's done some good things at Oklahoma. They're recruiting really well right now. I think two of the best hires he made in the last couple of years. He went out and got Jim Nagy to be his GM, and he also hired Lake Dawson out of the NFL to work with Jim Nagy in their player personnel department. And I think that's why Oklahoma's put a couple good rosters together the last couple of years, Trev, and they're trending in a good direction. So this is a big year for Brent Venables. And it's not even so like they've got to play for the title. It's just more so just show me that you can be consistent, even if they just go 10-3 and, maybe they go 9-3 in the regular season and win a bowl game, or go 10-2, make the playoffs and lose in the first. That's still, to me, okay, at least we've set a new floor. The floor is now 10-2, 9-3. That's the floor. That gets you a lot closer to one good offseason, one good portal class could put you into championship category, where you go from 6-7. That's a different animal. So I'm with you. It's a big prove-it year for Brent Venables. I also think it's a big prove-it year for Josh Heupel. And I would argue that Josh Heupel has underachieved quite a bit the last couple of years at Tennessee. You know, he had that great 2022 season. They went 11-2 with Hendon Hooker. And I think they've disappointed the last 3 years. And yes, I know they made the playoffs in 2024. That was a very uninspiring playoff team. And that was a year in the playoffs where there were 5 teams that were just way better than everybody else. 5-6 teams that are just way better than everybody else. Oregon, Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State. So 6. It's a big gap between them and everybody else. Where in 2025, it was much deeper, much more, much more balance in the playoff. And so I think he's very much underachieved. And even the way their best season finished was like, that was a very disappointing season. And I know that they finished in the top 10 the last couple years and all that, but they had no business being ranked in the top 10 last year, Trev, because they had no business being in the playoffs. It was the typical, they're in the SEC. You know, like they beat a ranked Oklahoma team who ended up having a losing record. They lost to Arkansas, who had a losing record. They beat an Alabama team that was very overrated. What else did they do? They got whooped in the second half by Georgia, and they got blown out by Ohio State in the playoffs. Like, what did they do to prove to that was some great team in 2024? I didn't see it. So I think he's got a lot to prove. He's a solid football coach, but Tennessee won't settle for solid. I think they need a really solid year. You're in year 6. So the whole, we're not sure about our quarterback situation, so give us time. Why? Why were you, we thought we'd have Nico. There's no way you thought Nico was going to be on your team in 2026 when you signed him, because you thought he'd be going to the NFL by now. So I don't want to hear that. You should have been better prepared for this. And I just think they've underachieved in his tenure. I think it's a big prove-it year for him. I didn't put him in the overrated category because I don't hear anybody arguing that he's a great coach anymore. But I think this is a prove-it year. I think he's still considered positive, and by Tennessee fans, you don't have a bounce-back top 15 season this year. I think people start to get a little bit restless. I really do. I think it's a big prove-it year for Matt Campbell. I've got somebody on Twitter that came at me talking about doing a 180 on James Franklin and kind of trashing Matt Campbell. I've never trashed Matt Campbell. I think Matt Campbell is a really solid football coach. I think the fact that he had Iowa State in bowl games most years, he did a really nice job there. What we trashed yesterday was the idea that you could take a bunch of players from an 8-4 Big 12 team, put them into the Big 10, throw a Penn State helmet on them, and assume that they're a top 15 team. That's not trashing Matt Campbell. That's trashing the rankings. What I've said about Matt Campbell is I think Matt Campbell's a really good coach at that level. Just like I think there's other coaches who are really good coaches at the level they're at that just can't go to a higher level and be successful, right? Like if you're an elite offensive coordinator at the Division III level, some guys are good enough to go up to D2, 1AA, D1, and still be good. Others go up another level, and there's better athletes and more complex schemes, and they struggle a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like, it just know your level. Know where you're at. We've seen coaches all the time that go to places and they're good football coaches. Tom O'Brien did a really nice job at Boston College. Randy Edsall did a really nice job at UConn. And they decided they wanted to go somewhere better. And so Tom O'Brien leaves for NC State. Terrible fit. That's just not his level. That's not the kind of coach he is. So perennially bowl team at Boston College, 9 games wins almost every year. Goes to NC State and in 6 years wins 9 games once and has 4 losing seasons. You know, like, you got to know who you are. And I don't know that Matt Campbell is a big time blue blood championship caliber coach. So he's got to prove me wrong, or he's got to say, yeah, I'm a good coach and I can have Penn State be competitive. We're going to be an 8 to 10 win team every year, but we're never going to have the kind of talent we had at under James Franklin. We're going to be that gritty team. He'll probably beat Ohio State more than James Franklin did, but they're also then going to lose some games they shouldn't lose because he won't have those elite rosters. He's a good football coach. That's just not an elite football coach. He's more of a Big 12 caliber coach, a program where you go 8-4. What a great job you did. And that's the thing. But he'll have a chance to prove me wrong this season. Well, not just this season, next few. But this season, it's about, okay, show that you can quickly get Penn State back to being an 8-9 win team in year one. Show that you can coach yourself into some of those big games. Because let's be honest, when they've played some of the top teams, they've been outclassed. They have. They have. Notre Dame being at 2019 being one example, but even Miami last year,
conference championship game against Oregon or against
Arizona State. Yeah, the Miami game. If Miami doesn't sit Cam Ward in the second half, that game's not close in the second half. So those are all things that factor into this for me, Trev, as to why I've got him on my list. Couple others real quick are in prove it years. Kenny Dillingham is in a big time prove it year for me. I need to see that Kenny Dillingham is the coach. Like, I don't think he is as good as here's the story on Kenny Dillingham right now, Trev. He is not a 3-9 coach. His first year at Arizona State, it was his first year as a head coach, inherited a mess of a situation from Herm Edwards. 3-9 team, terrible roster, all types of investigations going on. They go 3-9. His second year, they make the college football playoffs. Everything goes great. His third year, they go 8-5. So the question is, I know he's not a 3-9 coach. The question now is, are you that 11-3 coach that won the Big 12? Or are you the 8-5 coach that was solid, but just that's it? This year is going to be big for that. I love what they did in the portal. Love what they've done in the portal. And I'll be honest with you, most of these coaches I say, I don't like this guy. This is a guy that I'm absolutely rooting for. Absolutely rooting. And I'd be rooting for Matt Campbell if he wasn't at Penn State. I just can't root for Penn State because I despise that entire fan base and that entire program. But Matt Campbell, personally, I like. I like Kenny Dillingham. I want him to be successful. He just strikes me as a guy that cares about his kids, turned down Michigan. I mean, that Michigan wanted Kenny Dillingham, and he said, no, we're trying to do something here. I got a lot of respect for him. I'm rooting for him. I want him to do well. I'm just being honest. But he's got to prove it. He's got to prove that he's not just a likable coach, but that he's a really good coach. And then the last guy on my list is Tony Elliott. Was last year a fluke, or can you actually build a team that's going to perennial bowl team? And prove it to me does not mean you got to win 10 games again. It just means you got to be a bowl team. Can you be a consistent bowl team at UVA? That's what I want to see from Tony Elliott. Can you be a plus 500 team? And then occasionally with everything going right, you can win 10. That's it. It's not, if you can't win 10 every year, I'm disappointed. Nope, that's not my standard. It's UVA. It's not my standard. But was last year a fluke, Trevor? Or is he just kind of that really nice guy that players love and play hard for, but just,
right,
can't win? Or is he what he was last year? And if he's in between, which one's he closer to? So, and he's another one that I'm rooting for. He just, like we said before last year, Trev, his players play hard for him. They're just not very good. Well, last year they were very good. Last category of rankings, hot seat's different deal, but up and coming coaches. Just quickly we'll go 5 coaches that were both either our first year coaches or coaches that are at new schools, or just coaches who aren't getting a lot of, haven't been head coach for a long time, or younger guys that were like, hey, look, this is a guy to keep an eye on as they are somewhere new or moving up or trying to move up or whatever the case may be, Trev. So let's have some fun with this group, and then we'll do the hot seat last. So who, Trevor Trowbridge, are your 5 up-and-comer coaches? We actually, let me see your list of your up-and-comers. Okay, interesting. Yeah, let's go. Let's get into it. Let's get your 5. Let's do it.
So the first one on mine, I have Alex Golesh for a lot of the reasons that I talked about of what he did at USF. Turned around that program that was just in shambles, and then that earned him the opportunity to go to Auburn. I'm high on Auburn for a lot of reasons. Alex Golesh is leading that charge. It's not just because they have an influx of USF players coming in. Byron Brown, who's one of my personal favorite quarterbacks that I'm very excited to watch in the 2026 season. I don't think he's going to lead Auburn to the national title or anything like that, but Alex Golesh is definitely an up-and-coming coach. There's a reason why he went from the G5 level straight to the SEC to a program like Auburn, so he's another one to keep an eye out for me. This next one was tough and made it even more tough considering the conversation that we just had about this gentleman. But I had to take off the Notre Dame hat because he is rightfully so pissed off a lot of Notre Dame fans, myself included. But I actually have Joey McGuire on my up-and-coming list for a couple of different reasons. Some of them you actually hinted at when you were talking about him. Look, if he can keep the Notre Dame comments to himself and stop clowning himself, from a football standpoint, I like what he's done. It just sucks that he is now the guy that had a taste of success and now talks like he's Kirby Smart. That's really frustrating.
Right.
And it takes away from what he has done as a football coach. But I do like what he's done. He's gone 20-7 the last 2 seasons, made the college football playoffs and won the Big 12 last year. Prior to his arrival, Texas Tech only had 1 winning season since 2016, and they've had 4 straight under Joey McGuire. That's what I put on here. I know, man. My name is going to be at the top of the list on the hot seat, man. I mean, I'm going to bump it. Like, that's what's so tough. But I'm looking at this as objectively as I can.
Yeah.
And what he's done at Texas Tech, I think warrants him, in my eyes, to be an up-and-coming head coach.
Trev, we could debate whether or not last year was on him or was it more on other people.
Sure.
But the point is, last year was not a fluke, though. The regular season was not a fluke, though. They dominated the Big 12. They didn't catch a bunch of breaks to win the league. They dominated the league outside of 1 week when their starting quarterback didn't play. So you can't not be impressed with what they did last year. I think the only debate is, hey, you're acting like a clown, like you're acting like you've done something. I just don't give him as much credit as I do some other people for it. But your point. Let me just say this on why Joe McGuire would not be on my list. He's 54.
Fair.
And for me, it's like that's why I didn't put Bob Chesney on mine, is because he's 48. Like, I tried to keep it more to like younger guys, but Bob Chesney was originally on my list. But it's like he's an ascending coach, but I can't put him in an up-and-comer because he's 48. I kind of like about 40 was about where my cutoff was, because a couple of these guys were 40. But yeah, that was factored into it for me as well. I can't have a guy that's 54 on mine.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. Another one on mine is John Summerall.
Yeah.
I mean, plain and simple, I mean, he's won everywhere that he's been. He went 23-4 with Troy in 22 and 23, and then he went 20-8 with Tulane, and then they made the college football playoffs. I'm very excited to see what he does at Florida. I think that's going to be very interesting to watch what he does down there in Gainesville. So he's on this list for me. And then I do have Bob Chesney on this list. I didn't pay too much attention to age. It's very valid.
And that's why I didn't give you criteria. I just said up-and-comers, and you can define it however you want. I like doing it that way with things like this, because then it's not so static where I define the terms how I want them to be, which then forces us into the same list.
Yeah.
So that's why I left it a little bit more vague.
No, I get you. I really like Bob Chesney. There were a lot of questions about James Madison post Curt Cignetti. And I think
he took the whole freaking roster with him. You know what I mean, Trev? Like,
yeah.
I mean, he took every good player they had. He basically took with him to Indiana.
Took them all to Indiana. And then he goes 9-4, and then follows that up with a 12-2 record and a berth in the college football playoffs. I mean, that's so impressive. So I have him on this list. I'm very excited to see what he does at UCLA. Maybe it'll ignite some rivalry in like the battle for LA between UCLA and USC. As a head coach, I'd much rather have Bob Chesney than Lincoln Riley. So, yes. I mean, I'm very interested to see what he could do, man. But he's on this list for me as well.
Yeah. Is that your 5, Trev?
That was my 4. I only had 4 in this one. Yeah.
All right. So my up-and-comers, I have Alex Golesh as well. Love the job he did at South Florida. And honestly, let's be real about something else. Tennessee has not been the same offensively since he left. They haven't. They have not been the same. And so that kind of means something to me. And he was also with Josh Heupel for a year at UCF. So I have some major questions about, how that's going to be for Tennessee. But to your point, did he light the world on fire at USF? No. But he took over for a team that went 1-10 the year before, or 1-11 the year before, 2-10 the year before that, and then 1-8 the year before that. Trev pointed out earlier, it's like, was it 3-29? The 3 years before he went. And in year 1, they went 7-6. In year 1, they went 7-6. Beat Navy. Beat UConn, beat Syracuse 45-0 in a bowl game. In year 1, they go 7-6 again in year 2. Again, their losses: Alabama, Miami, Tulane, Memphis, Navy, who was all good teams. You had a bad loss to Rice. Go to a bowl game and beat Coach Nia Matalolo at San Jose State. Then, of course, this year they kind of kicked the door down a little bit. They go 9-4. One of their losses is to Miami. Actually, they went 9-3 with him as coach because I don't believe – did he coach them in the bowl game? I can't remember if he coached them in the bowl game or not. I don't think he did. I don't think he did.
No.
So he goes 9-3 this year, and one of their losses is to Miami. But they go on the road, beat Florida in the swamp. They blow out, North Texas. The great close loss to Navy, close loss to Memphis. He did a heck of a job this year. Love their offensive system. And by the way, also blew out Boise State. Beat Boise State more convincingly than Notre Dame did in the opener. So I like the job he's done. John Sumrall, you nailed it, Trevor. Guy's won everywhere he's been. And he's been at places where other coaches have also won. So it's kind of, my only question with him is like, okay, you're a really good coach, but you walked into a Troy situation where they hadn't won in 3 years. So not since Neil Brown was there, but it is a place that had a track record for winning. You walked into Tulane, a place that was really good under Willie Fritz and kept it going. That impresses me. So I want to see a little bit from him. His story's a little bit different than Alex Golesh's, but his teams were also better than Alex Golesh's teams. But you watch them play, Trev. They're tough. They're, there's all the things that you see. He's an up and comer as well. Another guy that I have on my list is sticking in the SEC is Will Stein. For 2 years, we're like, I can't believe nobody's looking at Will Stein as their head football coach. And now Kentucky has. He's young. He's, I think, second or third youngest coach in college football. I think he's the youngest Power 4 coach. I think the kid at Florida Atlantic, I mean, he kind of is. He's like over a decade younger than me. But the guy at Florida Atlantic is the youngest. I think Will Stein is like second or third overall youngest in the Power 4 level, I believe. Don't know what kind of head coach he's going to be. We're going to find out. But, man, his offenses are going to be fun to watch. There's no doubt about that. So I'm very curious to see what he does at Kentucky. And then going over to the Big 12, same thing with Eric Morris at Oklahoma State. I can't put Eric Morris on the same level as Sumrall and Golesh and some of those guys because he had a great year last year, certainly. But they were sub 500 his first 2 years. And so now sub 500 at a place that, was about that before. I mean, they were 7-7 the year before, 7-6 the year before that. So, I mean, it's not like he didn't improve them the first 2 years. His third year, though, they took a big jump. One good year does not show me something, but his offense is fun to watch, and it's not just throw it all over the field. They had one of the leading rushers in the country last year in Caleb Hawkins. So very curious to see how he does at Oklahoma State. He's an up-and-coming coach as well. And then my last one's G.J. Kinney. I'm going to shout out to Detroit Hunter. He's called that one. Personally, I'm always going to have a hard time saying something nice about G.J. Kinney because as a Notre Dame fan, I'm still a little bitter about that Tulsa loss when he was a quarterback. But look, he's done a really nice job there, Trevor. He's been there 4 years and has taken them to a bowl game every year that he's been there. The coach before him was there for 4 years. He went 3-9, 2-10, 4-8, and 4-8. And in G.J. Kinney's 4 years, 3 years at Texas State, they've gone 8-5, 8-5, 7-6. In his 1 year in Incarnate Word, they went 12-2 and made it to, I think, the semifinals that year. Yeah, I think they made it to the semifinals and lost to North Dakota State by 3. Well, Incarnate Word was pretty good, but the coach before him at Incarnate Word was Eric Morris. Well, Eric Morris went 6-5, 5-7, 3-3, and 10-3, and then G.J. Kinney took it to a whole nother level, and has been pretty solid at Texas State. It's like we talked about in the Bison Hold, though. Can he get the defense going to where now they can actually be better than 8-5? That's my question on G.J. Kinney, but he's put himself in a position where I want to see him. Then there were some other coaches. Somebody said, "What about Jake Dickert?" He was on my list of coaches to keep an eye on. The job he did last year at Wake Forest was very good. Had a good year at Washington State. There's several guys that we had on our list, Trev, that we're keeping an eye on. Jake Dickert at Wake is one of them. I want to see another year from him, but we kept it at 5 for this reason. But yeah, there's a lot of coaches that I would have on my list that I'm also very curious about. But The reason that I don't have Jake Dickert on my list, honestly, is because when I looked at these programs, Kentucky, Auburn, Florida, Oklahoma State, I don't think Wake Forest can be that as a program. It's just a lower ceiling for me. And G.J. Kinney's on it because I think he's that next G5 coach that if he can get that defense going and they can be that, maybe a 10-win team, maybe compete to be the G5 rep this year, I think he could be the next hot G5 coach like Summerall, like Golesh, like Eric Morris, that makes that leap where he's the guy that people are going after next year.
One of those coaches for me, real quick, before we transition over to coaches in the hot seat, which is our final one here. One of those coaches for me in the Big 12 is Colin Klein at Kansas State. I'm very intrigued by that hire. He didn't make that list for me as up-and-comers, but, he's quickly rising in the coaching ranks. He was an offensive coordinator at Texas A&M. He just got hired as alum. My one hesitation about him is I feel like with a lot of the quarterbacks he's had, especially in recent years, he's coached them to be him, which I think is tough. That's why Connor Wegman struggled. I think that's why there were aspects of Marcel Reed's game that struggled. Now, he's going back home to his alumni or to his alma mater to coach a guy in Avery Johnson who does have a lot of similar traits. So I'm very interested to see what he does this year. But yeah. That's the other one. Go
ahead. You got it.
Let's talk coaches on the hot seat. And some of these were pretty straightforward in my list. After this show today, I'm sure there's some people that want to see me on the hot seat, but thankfully I'm not a head coach.
No, we're just giving you a hard time, man. Look, you have opinions that you can defend them, though. That's the thing. Like, you can say whatever you want. It's like, can you make an argument as why this is going to be the case, or are you just saying things to get people all fired up? Everything that you said, we're all having fun, but in all seriousness, like you can defend everything you said and make a reasonable argument for everything you said. I like the fact that the chat thinks that they can bust your chops a little bit because it means they like you. So take it as a badge of honor.
Here's hoping so. Hopefully my hot seat list doesn't get people too fired up. But at the top of my hot seat list,
you just say Marcus Freeman's overrated. So
that's true.
That's true. Don't even put that out there, Brian. Like, why are you even putting that out there? That's not what
somebody's going to clip that. I'm going to get tagged in that so many times.
Yep.
Oh, so many times. Oh man. Top of my hot seat list is Kirk Ferentz. And no, I'm just kidding. So top of my hot seat list.
Okay, now you're out. Okay, Trav, you done did it. I take back everything I just said. You're trash.
Top of my hot seat.
If he wasn't on the hot seat after his freaking son ruined that offense, he ain't going to be on the hot seat now. So.
Yes, very true. Very true. The top of my hot seat list, in all seriousness, is Deion Sanders at Colorado. He has a 16-21 overall record. 9 of those wins came in one season where he had a Heisman winner who's now gone, and Shedeur Sanders was a quarterback. He is now also gone. He has a 7-17 record outside of 2024. Here's the honest conversation we need to start having with the Buffaloes. Outside of 2024, is Colorado that much different than what they were before Deion Sanders?
No.
I don't think that they are. They're having like 5-7 seasons. I think one year they went like 1-11, which is abysmal. Deion Sanders hasn't done that. But outside of the influx of like media attention that they've gotten, are they really that different when it comes to the product on the field? I don't know the answer. Actually, I do think I know the answer to that, and I don't think it's that much different at all.
No, they're terrible, but they're not as terrible as the 1-11 team.
Exactly. But then
they're a better crap team than they were before.
Exactly.
Outside of that 1 year, yes.
And that's not really why you brought in Deion Sanders. So he's on the hot seat for me. Obviously, Mike Norvell's there. I think he's lost the program. And I mean like literally the program, not just like the team from 2025. I just don't know how much faith the Florida State football program has in him. And I don't think just a wave of new transfer portal players is going to fix that. I could be wrong. We'll see. But 2022 and 2023 were the anomaly years. He had losing seasons in 2020, 2021, 24, and 25, and he was a combined 15-30 in those seasons.
So basically all those years he didn't have Jordan Travis for a full season.
Basically, yeah. I mean, I've seen a pattern there, man. So
and that's why we say the things we do about Clark Lee and the thing we do about some of these other coaches is like, look, we have seen coaches have that one special quarterback and have really good seasons, and outside of those years with that quarterback, they're trash. Or they're not nearly as good. And that's why you have to have those reservations of when things are way different with this quarterback compared to the other times. You have to see that coach do it without that quarterback.
Yep. 100%. That's why Mike Norvell's on this list for me. Luke Fickell up at Wisconsin is also on this list to me. He has back-to-back losing seasons with Wisconsin, 5-7 in 24 and 4-8 in 25. Now, the one caveat to this, I will say, is the schedule is absolutely brutal in both of those years. You can't use that as an excuse this year.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. I debated about putting Luke Fickell in the prove it year, but like, let's be real about something. And maybe this comes across as a little too harsh, but when like the only thing that you have to prove is that you should still have a job in 2027, that's not enough for you to be on the prove it category for me. I think Luke Fickell's close to the hot seat. At a school like Wisconsin, you can't have back-to-back losing years. So he's on here for me. Bill O'Brien at Boston College is definitely on this. He's just not head coach material. He went 7-6 his first year in Chestnut Hill, but then the wheels came off in 2025 with talent on the roster that was significantly better than 2-10.
Oh gosh, yes.
Significantly. Now, does that mean I thought they were going to go 10-2? Also, no, but they should not have been 2-10. Right. Yeah, and the talent on the roster this year is shades of what it was in 2025. I think he's on the hot seat. He is honestly on my watch list of coaches of, depending on how bad the season gets in 26, does he finish through it?
They're also a Steve Angeli injury away from being 1-11.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, honestly, they are.
Steve Angeli doesn't get hurt, they would absolutely have beaten Boston College in the last game of the year.
Agreed completely. And then the final coach on this list for me is Shane Beamer at South Carolina. I don't know if there was a bigger underachiever in college football in 2025 than Shane Beamer. And I don't know if it's overly close. With guys like Lenore Sellers and Dylan Stewart and Nick Harbor and Vandrevius Jacobs, you go 4-8. And then on top of that, you've had one winning season in the last 3 years. I mean, this is a do or die season for Shane Beamer. And when you have the level of composure that he does on the sideline, when your back is against the wall in a do or die season, it's not a good look. So I have Shane Beamer on this one as well.
Trev, we have some similar coaches. I have Norvell on my list. I have Bill O'Brien on my list. I have Shane Beamer on my list. I think they're all flat out on the hot seat. Like, and this list is who should be on the hot seat. I mean, look, Shane Beamer, I don't know that he's on the hot seat per se, like the same way that Billy Napier was going into last year. Sure. But if they underachieve again, he's gone, whether he goes into the season on the hot seat or not. Dan Mullen wasn't on the hot seat going into the year he got fired. You know what I mean? Brian Kelly wasn't necessarily on the hot seat going into the season. You know what I mean? Like, you can quickly get yourself on it. These guys are, I think, should be on it or are on it. I'll add 2 more to your list. And we had like 12 guys each, and we had to pick 5. Dave Aranda at Baylor is on my list. I think he's kind of done enough in a couple of seasons to kind of warrant another season, but I don't know that he can underachieve again. I had that great 12-2 year, and then the year before that, 2-7. The years after that, 6-7, 3-9. He was on the hot seat going into 2024. And I think he rebounded with a nice 8-5 season, had some good wins that year. And then, played LSU competitively in the bowl game, and then goes 5-7 last year. Just fell apart down the stretch, lost 5 of their last 6. Had some really bad losses last year too. I think if he doesn't take him to a bowl game this year, I think he's in trouble. I think he's in a lot of trouble. And then my other one that I didn't have on the list is, I don't know if he's on the hot seat, but he should. And that's Matt Rule. And Matt Rule's an interesting case. I think Matt Rule is the AD at Penn State saved him. Because them making think like, well, hey, maybe if they want Matt Rule, maybe he's doing a better job than we think or something. I don't know what the justification was for re-signing Matt Rule and giving him an extension. If anything, I'd have been like, take him, please. That means we get buyout money. We can go get a coach who can win. Matt Rule's been a giant disappointment at Nebraska. 5-7 in year 1, goes 7-6 in year 2. Starts off well. They start off 5-1 with their only loss being an overtime loss to a ranked Illinois team. And then they just fall apart. They lose 5 of their last 7 games, and the only win was over Wisconsin and Boston College. We're in a bowl game, which were not good wins. Their claim to fame that year was what? Almost beating Ohio State. Like, that's the best game he's had at Nebraska, is almost beating Ohio State. Think about that for a second. And then this year, they come out again in 2025, this past year, Trev, and it's the same kind of story, right? Start off 3-0, really nice, gritty win over Cincinnati. You play Michigan super tough to go 3-1, and then the next 2 weeks you go out and you beat Michigan State. You go on the road and beat Maryland, And at the time, Maryland was like not a bad team. Maryland was 4-1. And then again, it falls apart. You lose 4 of your last 6. Your wins are a 7-point win over a bad Northwestern team and a 7-point win over a bad UCLA team that fired their coach. You got blown out by Minnesota. You had a close loss to USC. You get blown out by Penn State, who stunk. You get blown out by Iowa. I mean, you gave up 40 points to Iowa, Trev. And then you get blown out in a bowl game by Utah. He is flat out on the hot seat. He should be on the hot seat. And I don't know the inner workings at Nebraska, whether he is or isn't, but he should be. Absolutely should be. And somebody said, how about Loxley? He's also on the hot seat. There's a lot of coaches, in my opinion, that are on the hot seat going into this season, Trev, that we could go through and talk about. So, but I think those 5 are the ones that, and I had Beamer on my list as well, Shane Beamer on my list as well. There's a lot of coaches that we could go through and say, hey, this guy's on the hot seat. And some of the guys aren't on the hot seat, but that's why some of those prove-it coaches like Tony Elliott, like if they fall back to 3-9 this year, then I think he kind of goes back to the hot seat a little bit. But I think there's a lot of coaches. We'll see. I think Dave Doran is a guy, to me, that's a little bit on the hot seat this season. He's got to turn some things around. I think Bill Belichick, if they don't show some progress, he could be on the hot seat. I think that's an interesting one to look at. I think Scott Satterfield at Cincinnati, if they don't kind of have a bit of a bounce back year, he could be on the hot seat. I think Rich Rod got his mulligan at West Virginia last year. They've got to show some progress, or he'll go into 2027 on the hot seat. I don't think they get rid of him after 2 years. That'd be silly. So I think there's a decent list of coaches that are on the hot seat. I think Jeff Lebby has to show some progress at Mississippi State as well, or he could find himself on the hot seat. So there's a lot of guys that could be on this list, but I think the 5 that I came up with are the 5 that I think have the most, that are most on the hot seat. And then obviously Trev has his own 5 as well. So that's where we would be. Did have a super chat, Trev, before we get out of here, from Charlie Weiss's Last Belt Loop.
Appreciate the super chat. Don't forget, there were Ohio State fans begging for Day to be fired on Twitter when Notre Dame was winning against Ohio State during the 2023 game. Do you think with Cignetti winning it, put a fire under Coach Marcus Freeman? Thanks, IB.
No. I mean, can I sit there and say that if there's 50 logs in the Notre Dame fire for 2026, that Cignetti winning it is not one of those logs? I'd be a fool not to say that. Do I think that is in a top 30, 20 reasons maybe of why Marcus Freeman's fired up about 2026? If it is, it's in the bottom. It's at the bottom of the list. I don't think Marcus Freeman looks at it from an envy standpoint of, and I'm not saying you're saying that, Charlie, but like, oh man, I can't believe Cignetti won it. Now I really got to get things turned around. I think a lot of this just boils down to he knows that his team last year missed an opportunity to go win it all for 2 reasons. 1, their own doing, not handling business in September. And then 2, basically being cheated out of a playoff opportunity. And both of those things motivate him way more than whoever won it, in my opinion. So I'm going to have him I'm gonna say have him being motivated by a lot more things than Indiana winning it or whoever else would have won it. I think it's those 2 things, because I think no matter who won it, he's going to look at it and say, we should have been there, and we weren't because of what we did, and then also what the committee did. But what the committee did was, again, based on what we did. We put ourselves in that situation. I think that's what motivates him, not the other stuff. But like I said, is like, Trev, you know how it is, man. You have a fire. We have a fire pit in our backyard. You got the big logs, and then you just got that let's just throw that one on there. Maybe it's that, but it's not the big dogs. It's not the big logs that are making that sucker go for a while. It's 100%. Definitely not that.
100%. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel.
Chat, you guys were awesome today. One of my favorite chats of the day. You guys were great today. So thank you guys. You helped make the show better. When you guys are locked in and giving feedback and responding to what we're saying, it makes the show so much more enjoyable for us. So thank you guys also. You guys always tell us at the end of the show, great show, great chat today. You guys were great today. Appreciate y'all very much. Very, very well done.
IB Nation Sports Beat goes live here in about 15 minutes. They have their midweek mailbag. So you guys, please feel free to go in there, chat, throw in some questions for the guys to answer on the evening show. On your way out of here, please be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian and I will be back tomorrow. But until then, have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.